putting together, yeah.
But I want to only get it like that morning.
Are these printed copies going to be courtesy of your employer again?
Probably. Most likely.
Got all these beautiful color
What I might do is print out the printer-friendly stuff without the pictures on this one.
Okay.
So I think that's what I did last time.
I don't know. I mean, I got pictures of my copy, so I was happy.
They are collector's items, from what I understand. People do save them.
Well, clearly, I'm not doing it right then. My rabbits usually eat them.
What?
Well, no, you could probably make.
You can give the rabbits the ones for the meats that you hated.
See, then they get nothing to eat though.
You have rabbits?
I have rabbits.
She does have rabbits, and
they're cute.
They like to eat everything.
They are cute and so destructive.
Well,
Yeah.
Eric,
Do they like to cuddle?
Have you gone to anybody else's meets besides Dan's?
I have. I don't know whose, but I know I've been to some that aren't his.
Okay.
Do they like to cuddle?
They do like to cuddle.
Oh, Steve is in Asbury Park today.
He said he was in Baltimore today.
Same thing.
Yeah, same difference.
He said he was driving down to Baltimore yesterday and he was going to be there he was driving to Baltimore on Friday and he was going to be there the whole weekend.
Or is he talking about next weekend?
No, it's talking about this weekend because he wasn't going next weekend because he was going this weekend. I feel like I got lied to.
I don't know. I feel like I was lied to too because he said that you weren't coming. So
Yeah, that's right. And then I pull in here, I back into a parking spot, and you're almost directly across from me. So I'm like, what the fuck? And then I look at my phone and I see a text from Dan telling me the same thing. And I was like, well, yeah, I see her car right now.
Just so you know, we are on Vox.
all right, so have we given the people enough time to file in? I think we have.
I think so.
Right. It is 6 after the hour. And by the way, I need a couple of minutes to do something a little special at the start of this show, okay? Now, I would just like to make you aware that we have a very special holiday coming up on July 7th. Tasty Cake. Celebrating National Crimpet Day. Can you believe that?
Nice. I did not know that was a thing.
It's too bad I'm going to be in Alaska, but
Alaska's part of National.
I wanted a snack as we were starting the show, so...
Did you say July 7th?
You have to bring it with you. You can still eat it there.
Yeah, well...
They have mist cakes in Alaska.
Yeah.
Man,
I
I want to
wanted
be
a snack before we started
Alaska,
live,
thank
so
you.
I am having a Tasty Cake. Because let's be honest, if you're not having a Tasty Cake,
It's a mist cake.
it's a mist cake. I mean, it's just... You can think of all the great snacks that you could be having right now. They're all mist cakes, okay? Because it's not a tasty cake. This butterscotch crimpet that I am enjoying right now is absolutely delicious. And they're just great. I mean, what can I say? Tasty cake. Remember, National Crimpet Day on July 7th. Accept no substitutes.
Don't worry, I won't when I'm up there.
So you're saying that my Chex Mix was a mistake?
It doesn't matter what it is. If it's not a tasty cake, it's a miscake. You understand? So, well, we got that out of the way.
Well, I mean,
So don't make a mistake.
Buying adult beverages.
All right, we've
cool,
got
Heineken.
we've got David Golub here from East Coast Roads, and we've got Sconson on Skype.
Hello.
We've got Erica. Erica's here, and Bill is here, both repping the state of New Jersey. And we are talking about a very important topic tonight, which is Western New York and the city of Buffalo. Now, rumor has it that there's going to be a road meet there at the end of July. Maybe you've heard, I don't know.
We've heard talk about that.
Yeah, has it come up before?
Yeah,
once or
there's
twice?
been the gossip going around here in the central U.S.
I see. Okay. So, we're going to do our regular, webinar stuff tonight, but we're also going to kind of make this a preview of sorts for the meet itself. So, if anybody's out there who's interested in learning more about the meet itself on July 29th, this will be a good forum to put your questions out there, and as the show goes along, we'll be able to address them as we go. So, all right, we already talked about that. Oh, I also have a very important announcement to make here as we start announcements. What the hell am I even uploading on YouTube? I think I'm doing Nebraska now. I'm uploading I-80 and stuff around Omaha. We've been active on the podcast on Gribble Nation lately. Doug has been talking about his travels in Ontario and Michigan recently. Separate trips. And I just put up an episode yesterday about a conversation I had with my friend Jason down in New Orleans. And we had a very interesting talk about his experiences living in what I like to call Hurricane Alley, which is the central Gulf Coast between Louisiana and Mississippi. And he's got some stories to share, not just about Hurricane Katrina, living through that, but also some other storms that he's encountered over the years as well. So,
Okay, question for you.
Okay.
Are you imitating motorcycles still?
Am I what?
Imitating motorcycles.
You're I don't know what you're saying. What are you asking?
Are you imitating, impersonating motorcycles as they drive by you on the road?
I hope not. Anyway.
Okay.
So that's what's going on Gribble Nation, the podcast. On the blog, I think Tom is uploading. He's doing some stuff in Arizona and I want to say Nevada. He's been busy out in the Arizona area for a while now. So he's got new articles about that part of the world. Before I get to the biggest announcement, obviously I'm very late in talking about this because it's been going on for a few days now. I think 6 days as we record this on June 17th. You heard about the gas tanker that overturned and burned underneath the bridge, and they had to demolish the I95 overpass as a result. By the way, I think that we live a very charmed life sometimes, and we are very fortunate. Sometimes we get really, really lucky, and you don't realize how lucky you are until well after the fact. You know that we drove that ramp during the Philly meet last year?
Where?
Yeah. So
Yes, we did.
we did. That was the exact ramp that we took on day one as we were looping around to the Tacony Palmyra Bridge.
So I guess if anyone has pictures of that bridge, they're now relics and antiques.
I'm sure I have a picture of it somewhere.
I'm pretty sure I've got.
On my drive somewhere, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'll also mention I wound up doing my own thing for the Philly meet because I was sick with COVID at the time that the actual meet happened. So I did a makeup trip a couple of weeks later. And on that trip, I was driving up this section of 95. And right by where this wound up happening, I had this close call where something fell off. I'm not sure whether it fell off of a building or the vehicle in front of me, but bottom line, it came really uncomfortably close to having an accident there.
yeah, that's always been a weird area.
Yeah. Just seems kind of ironic that it's the same place.
So I saw this picture earlier online. If you go back to the previous picture, there's no space between those bridges, so I don't understand.
Well, you're talking about... So this is the rendering of what they're doing right now as a temporary fix. And they're basically going to build up an earthen wall.
Which becomes
So is that under the other direction, what currently is another... Like, where is that in space? Are those temporary ones in the location of the existing bridges?
Yeah, well, where they had to rip out both directions, right?
Yes.
So they're building the temporary embankment right in the center.
Oh, okay, so in the rendering, the new bridges are actually off alignment. They're actually going to move the roadway out.
So there's going to be a lane shift. It's going to be 3 11-foot lanes in each direction, no shoulders. And they're just going to pack everybody into the center of that. which I believe leaves them enough room to then build new bridges on the flanks and do a traffic shift over to those so that they can then build the inside and then do the final shift after that. That's what I'm assuming they're thinking.
Yeah, it just doesn't look like there's enough space to do that rendering there, but I guess I'd have to look at it and dimension.
Yeah, I mean, this was a very quickly put together rendering, too.
I like those renderings, too, that have trucks in the left lane in both directions.
yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah.
That's a really good point.
Right, yeah. So anyway, they came out, PennDOT and the governor of Pennsylvania came out and said that they could have they could have traffic moving on the interstate before the end of June.
I mean, earth and fill doesn't take that long to put in.
Well, if they're working around the clock, yeah. And they're working off of a concrete base because they're just building it up from the ramp.
Yeah.
So it's not like you have anything questionable underneath that you have to worry about.
And it's a temporary condition. You don't worry about a lot of questionable stuff if it's a temporary condition.
This is Pennsylvania. It'll be a permanent fix.
Well, the federal disaster declaration that was signed allows them to fast track a lot of the processes that would normally take a project like this a lengthier amount of time. So this allows them to, I don't know if the previous bridge was concrete or steel, but
steel.
Was it a steel bridge?
It wouldn't collapse like that if it was concrete. It collapsed differently.
All right. Well, it allows them to skip the line at fabricators. And we saw this before. So when I was working with Tappan Zee Constructors, we had this happen where the 495 bridge that settled, the footings settled. This was like 9 years ago now. But they needed reinforcing steel pile cages to rebuild the footings for that bridge. So they basically took from us in order to go down. So we sent some of our material down there to help them out, which didn't really affect our project schedule, but it's just an example of the kind of mechanisms that are unlocked when you have a federal disaster declaration signed. So my guess is that, I mean, they already have the design for this bridge because it's a pretty new bridge. They'll probably just rebuild what was there before.
Surprised they don't just throw like a Constech temporary bridge. You could probably get that in super fast, but maybe it's not big enough for interstate.
Well, that's a pretty long span too.
Is it?
It's got to be like 100 feet.
Yeah, I believe
Conspan can go 100 feet, no problem.
Well, with heavy trucks on it.
They had them.
I mean, it has to be interstate. You have to. It has to handle interstate traffic. So
they had them on I-78 recently. I don't know. Maybe this has a lot more than I-78 does in that location.
They don't have trucks in left lane on 78 in Jersey.
Oh, okay. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so that's the story with that. All right, you ready for a big announcement?
Yes.
Let's do it. So, I already know where my 2024 meet is going to be, and I know the city, and I know the dates, and so let's just cut to the chase here. This is a city that I really have become really interested in. I first visited Southeast Louisiana in 2017, and since then I've really gotten kind of fallen in love with it, I guess you could say that. Not to get too sentimental, but this is a city that I really enjoy exploring. There's a ton of interesting road and bridge stuff here, and if you're into the engineering / river control, water control angle of things, there's a ton of stuff here that's built by the Corps of Engineers that you'll find interesting as well. So I thought, well, there really hasn't been a meet here in at least 15 years. So it's kind of open country as far as road meets are concerned. So let's have a meet in New Orleans, and let's do it next year. And by next year, I mean 8 months from now. So this is going to be in February, 17th and 18th. I'm doing this over a holiday weekend because I know that some people have that day as a holiday, the Monday. So it might make their travel a little bit easier getting to or from. It's one less vacation day you'd have to use, in theory. It is also, because of the calendar of Mardi Gras, it falls on the weekend after Mardi Gras. So it's not going to be taking place during Carnival. It's going to be taking place after it, but only by a few days. So the thinking there is that if people want to come down and experience Carnival the weekend before, it would not be a stretch for them to just make a week out of it and stay, party your ass off Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then go to church on Wednesday, and then have a very melancholy rest of the week. You know, that kind of thing.
And then go to the meet.
and then really be sad at the meet. Yeah, exactly. So
No, I agree.
yeah, well, that too. So Mardi Gras falls on February 13th next year, which is actually one of the earliest possible days it could fall on, because
Yeah.
it's determined because it comes a certain number of days before Easter, which is determined by the phases of the moon. So depending on where Easter falls, you subtract, I think it's 40 days from that, and that's how you get Fat Tuesday. And then your distance from Fat Tuesday back to 12th night, which is the beginning of Carnival, that determines the length of time you have for Carnival. So actually people in New Orleans are not going to be happy, because Carnival is only going to be 5 weeks. Pretty
Only.
short amount of time, yeah.
Only 5 weeks.
Only 5 weeks, yeah.
And I can attest, when I was there in December, it was still carnival atmosphere. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I was not going to do New Orleans in the summer, and Bob brings up the good point about hurricanes, and that's why I don't want to mess with Louisiana during hurricane season.
Plus oppressive heat.
Well, have you seen the forecast for New Orleans this weekend? They're
No,
talking
I don't
about
regularly
they're talking about feels like temperatures above 110 degrees.
Oof.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we're not doing this in the summer.
Yeah, I mean, we floated around 100 for Wilmington, and that was hot enough.
Yeah. I really don't want to mess with summer. The fall, again, hurricane season drifts into October, so that kind of takes out the fall. You know, November, by that point, you're kind of getting into the holidays, and I don't want to mess around with that either. So really, the only good time of year to do this is like between February and April. So that's kind of how I came up with February. And it just kind of, to me, it feels right to do it this year at that time because, of the connection to the end of Carnival just a few days back. You know, that might appeal to some people. So that's the plan. Check AARoads on the forum in the next couple of days. There will be a thread started for that. It'll be kind of haphazard for the first few weeks because I'm going to be kind of up to my eyeballs and stuff that I'm doing for the meet that I'm already doing. But we'll gradually fill in the dots in the months ahead. So
I's, cross T's.
yeah, or whatever you want to do, you know, that's fine. All right, that's 2024 National. Hope you can join us for it.
Severe storms possible.
Anyway, the meet that's being held in a few weeks. Let's talk about the host city for that for the rest of our time together. You got a call from your stockbroker coming in here?
I don't know who's blowing me up.
All right. The Queen City of the Lakes, aka Buffalo. The city population of Buffalo has declined by about 50% from its high around the 1950 census. It currently sits at about 280,000. It was at one time one of the 20 largest cities in the world. Not in the world, in the country. Top 20 U.S. it used to be. Metro population is still about 1 million. That includes Erie County and Niagara County to the north, which is also Niagara Falls on up to the Lake Ontario shoreline. That's where they come up with that 1.1 million figure. Buffalo was established in the years after the American Revolution. It was a small outcrop village on the lake shore. Kind of like how Cleveland was founded. Cleveland was actually settled around the same time as Buffalo, like 1790s, that time frame. There were two competing villages that sprouted up at the end of the Niagara River. One of them was named Buffalo because of the Buffalo Creek that empties into Lake Erie at the foot of the Niagara River. The other one was known as Black Rock, and that was named for an outcropping in the river adjacent to where the original settlement of Black Rock was founded. Both villages, being right on the Canadian border, were of great interest to the British, and they were burned multiple times during the War of 1812, the war that kind of goes off the radar. Nobody really talks about it, but it was kind of a big deal in this part of the U.S., understandably. So after the War of 1812, we had the construction of the Erie Canal, which took place in the 1820s, and the original canal was completed in 1825. There was quite a fierce competition between the villages of Buffalo and Black Rock as to who was going to get the terminus of the canal. In the end, it was Buffalo that won out, and Black Rock eventually, because they've settled into second place, they found themselves annexed into Buffalo in 1853. In fact, the section of northwest Buffalo, right across from where Unity Island is today, that area is still known widely by its residents as Black Rock. So the name that goes back to circa the year 1800 still endures today, even though it's been a part of the city of Buffalo for over 150 years. The Erie Canal itself was, as I said, it was completed in 1825. It runs from the east end of Lake Erie out to the Hudson River north of Albany. It was considered at the time the nation's first superhighway, long before we knew what highways would really come to mean. One of the great engineering achievements of the 19th century, without a doubt. It's about 350 miles long. It contains 36 locks. It brought major growth to the cities along its path, specifically Rochester, Syracuse, Utica, and obviously Buffalo and Albany at each end. So the canal was a big part. The canal was really the first thing that put Buffalo on the map nationally. The next thing that happened was the growth of the national railroad system. When this began, within 20, 30 years of the completion of the canal. Railroads were, because of its position on the international border, it was very instrumental in cross-border travel as well as domestic travel, as you had lake freighters coming in with goods that had to be offloaded in Buffalo and then transported the rest of the way on railroads. So there were a lot of railroad terminals that sprouted up. The grain industry really became an important thing because, again, you had railroads and ships on the lakes bringing in grain from further west, and this had to be offloaded and either stored in grain elevators or immediately put on other trains to continue further east. So the grain industry was really a big boom for the city. And then later on in the late 1800s and into the 20th century, the steel industry was a big thing in Buffalo, at least until the 1960s or so. So it was really a center of industrial power, like from the 1860s on through the 1960s, really. And as a result of that, and because of deindustrialization that happened after World War II, we think of Buffalo as one of the capitals of the Rust Belt today, alongside other cities like Cleveland and Youngstown and Detroit and Gary and Chicago. It's a downturn that the city has yet to recover from, really, and it continues to struggle to this day to reinvent itself in the post-industrialized world of this part of the country. One other thing I would like to mention is that you may not think of Buffalo as having the country's oldest urban park system, but that is exactly what it has. Anchored by Delaware Park on the north side of town, and there's a large coordinated and unified green space system throughout the city of Buffalo that was developed in the 1860s and 70s by a gentleman named Frederick Law Olmsted and his partner Calvin Vaux, who are more famous for their contributions in New York City's development of Central Park and Prospect Park. But before they became famous for those, they were here developing the parks in Western New York, here in Buffalo.
Western Park.
We want to talk sports for a minute. I guess we should. There are the four major sports are represented here, plus one, and I'll get to the plus one in a second. The Buffalo Sabres, everybody loves hockey in Western New York, right? Except they have a love-hate relationship with the Sabres these days because the Sabres stink. They're going on 12 years without the playoffs at this point. They were founded in 1970. They are one of the oldest franchises to never win the Stanley Cup. All the franchises founded before 1970 have won the Cup at this point. I think St. Louis was the last holdout from that club, but they won it in 2019. They played in the Stanley Cup Finals twice, 1975 and 1999. Their 1970 squad was famous for the French Connection. This was a line of Gilbert Perrault, Rick Martin, and René Robert. The three gentlemen I just named were from French Canada up in Quebec, and they headlined a very resilient squad in the 1970s that eventually made it to the Stanley Cup Final in 1975. I believe they lost to the Flyers that year. So yeah, they are immortalized. If I skip ahead a few slides. The French Connection is immortalized on the slide on the right. They have a statue in Alumni Plaza across from KeyBank Arena.
So they did not win the Stanley Cup yet, huh?
No, they are 0 for 2 in Stanley Cup Finals appearances.
Well, at least the Flyers are better than somebody. No, just kidding.
Yeah, well, that's about the only thing the Flyers have to fall back on these days, because they stink too.
Yeah.
Well, it's been 48 years since they won the Cup last. So, whole generations of Flyers fans were not around the last time that they won something.
Yeah, they probably were wondering where the goalie went.
Yeah, well, whole generations of Bills fans haven't seen them win anything either. Sorry, Doug. The Bills, NFL team of Western New York, founded in 1960. They were one of the 8 original AFL teams, the rival league that was started in 1960 that eventually merged with the NFL. Most of the 8 original teams in the AFL became the cornerstones of today's American Football Conference, or the AFC. The Bills are famous for playing in 4 straight Super Bowls in the early 1990s without a win in any of them. They currently play at Highmark Stadium out in Orchard Park. They used to play their home games at War Memorial Stadium, aka the Rock Pile, on the east side of Buffalo. The Rock Pile was mostly demolished in the 1980s. Right? It was 1980s, right? Yeah. And but the entryways at each end of the stadium still remain standing today, and you can go and visit them today. There's an athletic field there now on the grounds of where the stadium used to be. The Bills. So again, the Bills currently play in this facility. It's not called Bills Stadium anymore. It was for like a year or two. I think I took these pictures in 2020. Out in Orchard Park, construction actually just broke ground on the Bills' new stadium, which is supposed to be completed in 2026. It's being built basically across the street from where the existing stadium is located in Orchard Park. And it's supposed to look something like this. I do find it interesting that they chose a fully outdoor venue for their new place. I'm also very curious to know why they decided against the popular rumor of the day, which was to place it somewhere downtown near the KeyBank Arena. But they decided against doing that for whatever reason. Doubling down on their suburban location, which is, by the way, it's way out from downtown. It's on a good day, it takes you 20 minutes to get out there from downtown.
I think they put it indoors so that they can do it behind closed doors if they had a 7-foot snow blizzard.
Well, I don't think that would make a difference, but I do think that the indoor or outdoor thing makes sense for like hosting the Super Bowl or other events. That's like all the rage now. Like if you're building a new stadium, you're going to build it with at least a retractable dome to attract events and concerts like that. So I do find it a little interesting that they chose not to go with even a retractable roof for the new place. But anyway, that's a debate for another day, I guess. I was talking about hockey. People really love hockey in Western New York. For some reason, they really love lacrosse, too. We don't really talk about lacrosse when we're doing our sports breakdowns, but we should mention the Buffalo Bandits, who are the National Lacrosse League team for Western New York. They were founded in 1992. They are 5-time NLL champions. Most recently, they won their 5th championship a few weeks ago. So they had Bandits Fever downtown. It was the weirdest thing. I happened to be in town when the championship was being played, and it was very bizarre to see a bunch of people on the plaza at KeyBank Arena. It's like, well, the Sabres aren't playing. Why are there all these people here? And it's like, oh, they're actually like lacrosse fans that actually exist. I guess it's a thing. I didn't know that.
It takes a lot of skill to play the game. So.
Well, apparently it does. That's what I hear. The Bisons. There's no major league team in Buffalo, but there is a AAA team. Buffalo Bisons. They can really draw their history all the way back to the 1880s. The first iteration of the Bisons goes back to 1886. And they were a staple in Buffalo until 1970 when they left town. They moved to Winnipeg and then they folded a year or two afterwards. It was a very quick exit that they made. The Bisons were reincarnated in 1979. The new Bisons, as they were known, continue to be a AAA team to this day. They are currently the AAA affiliate for the Toronto Blue Jays. They play their home games at, and I didn't know that this was how it was pronounced until very recently. Silly me. They play at Salem Field, which is downtown, right off of Main Street. It is the largest AAA ballpark in the United States. I believe its capacity is around 16,000, something like that. So this stadium was built in the late 80s, and it was designed by the same firm who went on to design other ballparks in the retro classic ballparks, they call them. So this would be like, Camden Yards and Coors Field out in Denver, and a bunch of other ones too. This was the first one that they did, and they actually designed it so that they could add more seats on that upper deck there. You see how there's that roof there on top of the luxury suites? You could put extra seats up there and increase the capacity to 40,000 or so and put a major league team there. So at the time that Major League Baseball was flirting with expansion in Florida and in other places, they were looking at Western New York as a possibility also. And so they built this stadium thinking that it could, with minimal disruption, be converted for Major League use. Something that actually ended up happening anyway in 2020 and 2021. Because, something happened, right? Mm-hmm. So the Blue Jays, because they couldn't play their home games in Canada for over a year, they relocated their professional base here to Buffalo, which makes sense. The Bisons are already their AAA affiliates, so they didn't really have to move a lot of the furniture around to make it work. And it was right over the border anyway. So yeah, the Blue Jays played their 2020 home games here in front of no fans. And then they played some of their home games to start the 2021 season with fans before they were allowed to go back to Skydome, or whatever the hell it's called, Rogers Center? Yeah, Rogers Center.
Yeah, Rogers Center.
Yeah. In fact, the quick story about the luxury suite that I reserved for the after party. I don't know that I've actually said this, but the luxury suite is called the Blue Jays suite. And the reason it's called that is not just because there's a lot of Blue Jays memorabilia around the suite itself, but when the Blue Jays moved all their operations here to Western New York, they set up that suite for their general manager's office. I don't know that the general manager's chair is still there, but that space was taken over by the Blue Jays front office for about the course of probably close to a year. So, a little bit of a historical oddity, I guess, but one that's worth mentioning, right? Real quick on basketball, the current franchise that calls themselves the Los Angeles Clippers, they began their existence in the 1970s as the Buffalo Braves. They did not last very long in Buffalo, only 7 or 8 years before they skipped town to San Diego, where they were renamed the Clippers. And then Donald Sterling got involved and moved them up to Los Angeles, where they are today.
A clip joint.
Well, yeah. So, anyway, that is, I think I covered the rock pile. I covered all this stuff. Oh, yeah. I have to say, as I take a sip of my coffee cup that has Tim Hortons K-Cup in it, we need to talk about Tim Hortons for a second, because it's a very important coffee chain in the United States and Canada. There are over 5,300 locations in the U.S. and Canada. But for those of you who don't know the story of Tim Hortons, Tim Horton was a hockey player, a great hockey player. He probably would have been in the Hall of Fame anyway, if not for his business ventures as well. He played most of his career starting in the late 1940s with Toronto. He ended his career the last couple of years in Buffalo, so he's got this, eternal tie to Western New York, much like he has to Southern Ontario. His life was cut short in February 1974 in a single-car crash in Southern Ontario. He was driving back from Toronto to Buffalo. But by the time of his passing, his chain of stores had been founded 10 years prior. And he was kind of dabbling in coffee and donuts and other culinary creations. And he had a business partner who was really good at, the entrepreneur side of the business while he was kind of on the ice. And so the two of them built this chain basically out of nothing. And Tim Hortons today, as I said, has 5,300 locations, mainly in Canada. You do see a bunch of them in Western New York. And other, I think you see some in, maybe Ohio, Michigan, the northern states, the Great Lakes states is where you're most likely to see them. As a close on Tim Horton, his jersey number 2 was retired by the Sabres. His jersey number 7, which he wore for Toronto, was also retired. And he was he was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in the class of 1977. Okay, if you're in town and you like buildings, let's talk about buildings for a second. Seneca 1 is the building on the upper left. It is the tallest building in the city. It's got a roof height of well over 500 feet. It's 40 stories tall. It was significantly renovated in 2020 and 2021. I think there are now a collection of 200 luxury apartments in this building. God knows what they cost to rent, but people are reserving them, supposedly. Pearl Street Grill. Let's talk about that place for a second. That's where we're having lunch on the meat day. If you are familiar with New Orleans-style architecture, this building might look a little familiar to you, and that's because the people who are in charge of this building, going back many years, say that it was an inspiration to them. The outdoor patios, the multi-story balconies, that's a very Southeast Louisiana kind of thing. I've been coming to Pearl Street myself since I was in college, and this is going back 15 years or more. I feel old just saying that. But yeah, it was my favorite hangout when I was in school. And so I thought, if I'm going to do a meet here, we have to have the lunch here. There's no excuse as far as I'm concerned. Okay, a lot of people love City Hall, and that's probably the building that gets talked about the most in town. Art Deco masterpiece, completed in 1931. It was built around the same time as other buildings like the Chrysler and the Empire State Building in New York City. What did I want to say about it? It is one of the tallest municipal buildings in the United States. It was the tallest building in Buffalo until 1974 when Seneca 1 was completed.
How many tall buildings in Buffalo?
I guess it depends on what your definition of tall is.
Bigger than Cleveland's?
Well, it's not hard to do better than Cleveland. I love Cleveland, but I'm just saying,
on both of these buildings.
At the base of City Hall is Niagara Square, and in the middle of Niagara Square is this monument that I'd like to talk about for a second. This is the William McKinley Memorial. You may be familiar with President William McKinley, who served as the 25th President of the United States from 1897 to 1901. He was about 6 months into his second term in office when he was assassinated in Buffalo while attending the Pan American Exposition in town. Vice President Theodore Roosevelt was actually hanging out in the Adirondacks because, he was a big fan of the wilderness and nature and preservation and all that. So he was actually, hanging out in the Adirondacks when the assassination took place. I mean, McKinley had been shot. He lived a few days after he was shot. So it was it's more complicated than that, but Roosevelt basically had to quickly pack up what he was doing and make his way to the train station and head west to Buffalo to take the oath of office. If you are driving in the Adirondacks and you see the Roosevelt-Marcy Trail Scenic Byway, that is the route that Teddy Roosevelt took to get from wherever it was. I think he was at Lake Tier of the Clouds, which is one of the headwaters of the Hudson River. And he made his way to North Creek, where he picked up a train and headed west. But the Roosevelt-Marcy Trail, which is signed along parts of New York Route 28N, and I think there's a couple other routes that it's a part of also. That's the history of that scenic byway there. So if you get a chance to check out the memorial, it's a very interesting creation. I couldn't really explore it too much because they were doing some treatment of the marble. I mean, this is all marble that they put here, so it has to be cleaned, and I don't know what they do to it. There's some sort of chemical treatment that they apply to preserve it. But they were doing that on this day, so I got a few distant pictures of it. But it's an interesting piece. If you have a few minutes, it's right, as I said, it's in Niagara Square, so it's right below City Hall there. There's some more pictures of town. Thank you, drone. I'm so glad I bought you 3 years ago. I don't know that we'll get another chance to talk about this during the PowerPoint, but so Main Street, which runs right through the central business district, was open to cars, and then it was closed to cars when they put the light rail system in the 70s and 80s. And it's only been within the last few years that parts of Main Street have been reopened for car use. We are going to drive the parts of Main Street that are open to cars on the meet, but I find it but it's interesting to see the evolution. When I was in school, this place didn't look like this. You didn't have cars on Main Street. It was just a pedestrian plaza, and you had light rail trains going up and down like every 10-15 minutes. I don't think it's much of a coincidence that since they reintroduced cars to Main Street, that businesses have really started to come back and blossom along Main Street. Call me crazy, but, And by the way, if you walk further down just a few blocks to where the street access ends, and it picks up again as a pedestrian plaza, the street's dead. So, call me a Looney Tune knucklehead, but I don't think there's a coincidence. I don't think that's a coincidence that the parts of Main Street that reopened to traffic are doing pretty well, at least better than they were, significantly better, and the parts that are not open to vehicle traffic are still dead. So, one building that is not dead, that I think is one of my favorite buildings in the whole city, is the building on the right in this slide, and that is the Electric Tower, which was completed in 1912. Its design was inspired by a tower of the same name, which was built as part of the 1901 Pan American Exposition, and it was basically this giant tower with all these lights on it. Of course, electricity was still kind of in its infancy at the time, like around 1900, so this was still like a really cool idea to people. It's like the wave of the future, right?
Yeah.
Very beautiful building. It's 14 stories. The Beaux Arts style to its upper floors is... It does not It hasn't aged at all. It still looks beautiful, even over 100 years later.
And it probably generates electricity through lightning.
Well, I guess that's possible. I don't know of any documented cases of that, but
yeah, there is no proof of that. That's for sure.
Let's see. All right, a couple more historic buildings to talk about that we will be passing by on the meat tour itself. The one in the lower left is not in Buffalo, full disclosure. It's actually in Lackawanna. But it is a very significant building in its own right. The Our Lady of Victory Basilica, which was built in the 1920s, consecrated in 1926. I believe it was the first basilica in Western New York, if I'm not mistaken. If not the first, it was one of the first. And then on the upper right, we have the Richardson Building, which at the time when it was built in the 1870s, I have in my notes 1970, but that should say 1870, used to be a state hospital / asylum. This was like the administration building for it. They weren't doing the lobotomies in this building, but it was like the center of the complex. The building sat unused for a number of years. It's now, the complex itself is currently in the state of restoration and recycling. There's actually a hotel in this main building, so if you're not creeped out by its past...
That's pretty cool.
Some people think it is. You won't catch me spending the night in there, but you can book a room in there if you'd like.
I totally would if it was cheap enough, but I'm sure it's quite expensive.
It is kind of like upper end.
Yeah.
It ain't Motel 6, I'll tell you that.
I would stay it if it was Motel 6. You want those creepy ghosts in there?
Yeah, it's a little, I don't know what's creepier, this thing or Motel 6.
Well, you know what? That's true too.
That's why they leave the light on for you so you can see the creeps.
Yeah, I knew there was something. I knew there was some reason. Real quick, lower left. Before they built the Art Deco City Hall in 1931, there was this building, which served as City Hall until, I think it was the 1870. It was the 1870s when it was built. Up until 1931, and that's when the current City Hall took over. The building on the upper right was built in 1901 as the city's main post office. And operations there ceased in the 1960s. The building has fortunately been saved from the wrecking ball and is currently the main building of Erie County Community College's city campus. And this is, by the way, right across the street from the ballpark. So if you're coming to the game later, I took this picture on one of the, whatever that cross street is. I think it's Swan Street. And the building is right there. It's right, beyond the left field stands. So you can get a good look at it there. All right, the last thing I want to mention real quick. We will get to road stuff, I promise. I'm kind of going a little bit long here with the other stuff. But I kind of want to give you guys an idea about the city as a whole, not just the road stuff. Canal side. When I was in school, none of this stuff was here. So it warms my heart to see them finally actually doing something productive with this place. The area below the Buffalo Skyway and right along the riverfront used to be a wasteland for a number of years. And they've done a great job the last 10, 15 years of cleaning it up. There are a lot of different attractions here. This is going to be the subject of the pre-meet walking tour that we do. And to get your bearings of where we are in these pictures, we're only 4 blocks away from the Pearl Street Grill. So it's not a far walk. You can walk all of this stuff, relatively easily. There's a lot that we could dig into here. Maybe if we have more time, I'll get into it more. But you have the lakes, the reflecting pools on the lower left. Those are used as ice skating rinks in the winter. We have a restored vintage carousel that's recently added to the site. I believe that's been in operation for 2 years now. That's what you see in the upper left. The commercial slip is a recreation of the original Erie Canal terminus in Buffalo, and there's a lot of historic, placards and information and exhibits available for public use, related to the history of the Erie Canal in Buffalo. And for those of you who like naval history, we've got some of that in town too. There's the Naval Park, which is right, so where Canal Side is, the Naval Park is immediately to the lake side of Canal Side. So it's right next door. We have a Cleveland class cruiser. Try saying that with a mouthful of teeth. The USS Little Rock, the Fletcher class destroyer, the Sullivans, and the submarine USS Croker. Those are the three main exhibits, and they are all open for tours, so you can go and visit them today. There's also a large collection of memorials that honor New York State and Erie County veterans. I really like the one in the upper left here. This honors Western New York's Polish Americans who took part in the Second World War. Up until relatively recently, Buffalo was known for, and I guess to some degree it still is known as being a really big center of Polish American culture. The east side of Buffalo was really born out of Polish immigration, like over 100 years ago. It's one of the only cities in the United States that celebrates Dingus Day as an official holiday as a result of that. Dingus Day being the day after Easter, or Easter Monday, which is typically a day of feasting and partying and pranking and all that good stuff. I went to a couple of Dingus Day festivals when I was in school, and those were a lot of fun. All right. You want to talk about roads?
Let's talk
At
about
some
one.
point,
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
you would like to do that. Okay.
Yeah, at
All
some
right.
point.
Well,
I mean, you can take your time.
Well, let's do that then. The real master plan for the city developed in the years after World War II. There were two competing proposals. The first one you see on your left was developed in 1946. Pretty simple idea. You had a highway connecting downtown Buffalo with Niagara Falls, linking up with a highway that was meant to connect the other cities in central and eastern New York State. That sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? And then the other competing proposal, which was a bit more elaborate and a bit more heavy duty, I guess, which you can see kind of on the right. The Concept 5 proposal was expanded in the 1960s and 70s to include a bunch of other highways. Some have been built over the years, some haven't, and some have been partially built. But we'll kind of dissect all of that as we go. These planning maps from, well, the one on the left is a planning map from the 60s, kind of showing the progress of construction in the Niagara region. Plus, it has a lot of stuff that was kind of on the planning boards. You notice that there's an outer belt highway that would have connected basically the Rainbow Bridge and what's now the LaSalle Expressway with the outer suburbs east of Transit Road, New York Route 78, and then kind of looping back south and west to pick up, Orchard Park and Lackawanna down that way. The western end of New York Route 179 being another fragment of the outer belt that did see the light of day, but the vast majority of the outer belt never did see construction. And there were other highways that were looked at too, like a spur out to Lancaster, a spur out to Lockport. The spur to Lockport is partially built, as we'll discuss in a few minutes, but that one is probably never going to make it to its original intended destination. As the 60s unfolded, again, we have a lot of construction in town. The Thruway was the first big project, both the main line and also what was called the Niagara Thruway when it was developed. Nowadays it's I-190. That was mainly built in the late 50s and early 60s in the city of Buffalo. As the decades wore on, other highways, such as I-290, came into the fold. The 33 running from downtown out towards the airport, 198. The 990 saw construction in the 1980s, culminating with its completion to at least where it's at right now in the early 90s. And also, I want to mention real quick, it's hard to find documentation of this, but there's enough if you piece together enough puzzle pieces that they were looking into encircling downtown Buffalo with an inner loop of its own. We know that there was an inner loop around Rochester. There was one similarly planned for Buffalo, and you can kind of tell where it would have been if you look at Google Maps today. The ramps in the lower right that would have served the Elm Street and Oak Street one-way arterials, the end of the 33 Kensington Expressway, which dumps most of the traffic onto the Oak and Elm corridor, and then you have the ramps to and from Niagara Street on the left where 190 is. Where is that? That's right here. So it's not hard to imagine just drawing a line to connect those three, and that's roughly what they were thinking about doing. Funding was a big issue for this. The residents of Allentown, which is the neighborhood up in this area, just north of the theater district, like up in here, those people raised holy hell about it. They wanted no part of it. In the end, it never would have happened anyway, even if the residents had cooperated, because there just wasn't the money for it. You know, building a highway project that ambitious in the 1970s when so many other municipalities were struggling to find funding just to keep their businesses open. It was never really going to happen. But it was a pipe dream at best, but it's an interesting idea to think about. And how many years would it have stood before people realized that they made a big mistake in building it? So that is the brief synopsis of the Buffalo Inner Loop idea. Taking a region-wide view, real quick, I-90 is the mainline interstate in the metro, comes in from the east out of Rochester and departs compass south, generally, though, heading in a westerly direction along the south shore of Lake Erie. The other interstates in the metro, 190, the 290, and the 990. Well, there's no 990 shield on this map, but it's up in this area here. That's it right there.
Yeah, it's just right off the screen.
Yeah, well, actually, that's the extent of it on the screen here. It doesn't go any further than that.
Yeah.
Leave out the highest numbered interstate in the country.
I don't know, but the people who are in charge of Google Maps are clearly not road geeks. I would say that. That would be the first thing that I would include.
Yeah.
All right, let's go through these one by one at a time here, just to kind of give you an idea of what to look for. As we said, I-90 is the mainline interstate. It is known as the Thruway in Buffalo. So if you hear people talking about the Thruway, they're referring to I-90. The two terms are kind of interchangeable. Some people call it the 90, some people call it the Thruway. Either way, it's the same road, right?
Are these people that come from Southern California, or is it the other way around?
I don't know, but people usually refer to these highways by their number.
Uh-huh.
So, people will talk about, if they're talking about, like, the 33 or the 290 or...
Right,
yeah, that they always put the in front.
Yeah,
Which
okay, so I thought LA was unique on that one.
Yeah, I always thought that was a West Coast thing.
Yeah, same here.
It's not West Coast in whole, it's just LA.
Yeah, I know LA does that a lot, but Western New York does that too. At least in this area. I don't know if it's like this in other parts of New York State, but I found over the years of living there for 5 years and all that, and returning over the years, that that's what people call them. That's how people refer to them. So
don't try it in New York City. People will think you're talking about a subway.
Yeah, there's a crash on the 278 westbound at exit 30. Good luck finding out where the hell that is.
Okay, but
you could, but
that would be the Brooklyn Queens. That would be the BQE if you're talking New York City.
They would think that you were talking about a subway that used to exist.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
The original plan for the Thruway in the late 1940s did not include the continuation westward towards Pennsylvania. The original main line was originally supposed to end at what's now exit 53, which is I-190. The extension to Pennsylvania was added as construction commenced on the mainline quote-unquote Thruway east of Buffalo. At the time, it was known on planning maps as the Erie Extension. It now is more or less considered part of the main line. The main line is considered the whole thing from exit 1 to 61 now. Cashless tolling. Hey, I know a little thing about that because I worked on that for a year or so. The cashless tolling project was completed in 2019 and 2020, and there were some other improvements that were made into 2021. So you won't see any toll booths now in Western New York. The toll booths on 190 were removed a few years prior, and there were others that were removed even prior to that, but we'll talk about those in a little bit.
Unlike Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Texas.
Yeah, they ain't in a hurry to remove theirs. At least I know Pennsylvania isn't. I think that some of the agencies in Texas are looking into getting rid of theirs, but I don't think that Pennsylvania is on the horizon anytime soon.
Neither is Illinois.
Yeah, well, anyway. So yeah, that's cashless tolling has made things quite a bit easier if you're trying to get by Williamsville or Lackawanna, which is where the two mainline barriers used to be. Those are just a distant memory at this point. Yeah, 90 does not go through the city of Buffalo, but that does not mean that it does not have a lot of traffic on it. When they built the Thruway where they did, I think they assumed that it would serve as a bypass for the city, but all that ended up really happening was something called suburban sprawl. And now you have attractions out this way like the Bills Stadium and the Walden Galleria, which is off of Walden Avenue. And of course the airport is right out that way. So there's a lot of traffic locally that's using the free portion of the Thruway, which is between exits 50, which is I-290, and exit 55, which is US 219. It's a distance of about 12 miles, I want to say. There's no tolls charged on this part of the road. There's never been any tolls on this section of the Thruway. That was one of the agreements that was made as part of its construction in this area. 190, part of the Thruway system, still to this day, it was conceived around the same time as the 1946 original plan, which called for the construction of an expressway connecting downtown Buffalo with Niagara Falls. And that largely happened, today. Like, what you see with today's 190 is basically what they were looking to build as far back as the 1940s. Construction on 190 began in 1953 in the city of Buffalo. So this was built, it was built as part of the Thruway system. It was not, at this time, the Federal Aid Highway Act was not yet a thing. That didn't happen until 1956, of course. So they went ahead and built this without any, access initially to the interstate system. Parts of 190 that were built after the Federal Aid Highway Act did tap into federal dollars. But the concept of this highway was drawn up thinking that it would just be a spur of the New York State Thruway system. Construction through the city of Buffalo was completed in 1964. It was a tough slog to get this highway shoved in through areas like Black Rock, along the Black Rock Canal. So, for instance, if you're traveling in the area of the Peace Bridge, if you're heading north along the Niagara Riverfront, you can kind of tell that they shoved this highway in kind of in a narrow right-of-way, but in doing so, they kind of limited their ability to do anything about widening or anything like that, or making any real significant improvements. Like this picture in the lower right, this is in the Black Rock area of the city. There's not a whole lot that they can do as far as widening. They're kind of stuck with what they have. So really the highway that you drive today is kind of the same highway that's always been here. It's kind of an old urban classic. And I could not do a Buffalo PowerPoint. Quite possibly the most hideous overhead gantry in New York State by popular vote. In fact, I should take a poll on my meat thread page. I should start a poll.
Yeah.
You know, do you hate this sign more or the field? You know, I wonder which one would win. I bet you this one would win.
The square Interstate 290.
Well, there are a bunch of abominations in Western New York, and that's another one. Although I think we can thank the city of Tonawanda for the square interstate shield. That's my understanding. So it's not a DOT thing. Thank God. I'd have to go to the region headquarters in Poughkeepsie, which is about 10 miles from my house, and go yell at somebody if that was the case.
Shoot the messenger, man. Shoot the messenger.
No, I know. Yep. Okay.
And of course, you got Beaver, his peak.
Yeah. You got a lot of issues here.
Oh, there's the city of food traffic again.
Yes, another favorite of Western New York is the control city of through traffic, which you'll see a lot if you drive the 290 through Williamsville and Amherst and Tonawanda. The 290 was not a part of the original 1946 plan. It was part of the expanded plan that came in the 1950s. The 290 saw construction in the early 60s. It was intended, again, it's one of these highways that was intended as a bypass of Buffalo, but now just serves the suburban sprawl in between, like, the north towns, quote-unquote, of Buffalo and Niagara Falls. This is also where the University of Buffalo's North Campus is located. It's located in Amherst. It's actually located right near the interchange where the 290 and the 990 come together. Right at the northeast corner of the north towns, right at that part of the metro. I guess I should say a few words about the University of Buffalo. It is my alma mater, class of 2012. I spent 5 years of my life living here, and they were all spent day and night slogging away at my civil engineering coursework. And I consider myself very fortunate to have gotten through all of that, but I did. And as we'll talk about later, you know, sometimes perseverance is your best friend. I do want to mention real quick about the name of this highway. It's known as the Youngman Expressway, although nobody really calls it that. It's the 290. The road's official name comes from a gentleman named Elmer G.H. Youngman, who was a project engineer working on the design and construction of this highway in the early 60s, who passed away suddenly during the road's construction. The road was named in his honor when it was opened. The working title of this highway was the Powerline Expressway because, as you can see in the pictures, the highway mainly parallels the main Powerline corridor that originates out of Niagara Falls and makes its way south and east through the northeastern part of the metro. I have to say, I am a Powerline geek, so that is one thing that I find really cool about that highway. All right. We teased this before, but real quick, I'll tell you about the interstate system's high score, which is I-990. There's no other interstate highway as of the recording of this program that has a higher numerical value than this.
Did that sign before show it, 2 slides before show it practically bursting out of the numbers bursting out of the field?
2 slides ago. I don't know. Which 2? Is that my 2 slides ago or Wisconsin 2 slides ago? I don't know which one you're talking about. Yeah. You guys from Wisconsin, I don't know if you guys know how to count properly, so that's why I'm double checking.
I mean, counting is really hard, so...
I get that, you know.
Yeah, that one. See, has the 990 north, and the 990 is about ready to burst out of the shield.
Well, I mean, if it does burst out, you can go and collect it for your collection.
Aha!
Yours for the taking.
So this highway, as you see by its name, was intended to extend up into Niagara County to the far northeastern fringes of the metro up in the area of Lockport. That was his intended destination. There's also some documentation out there that suggests that it would have been part of a much longer toll-free highway that would have connected Buffalo and Rochester, basically incorporating what exists today as I-990 and what exists today as New York Route 531, kind of tying those two together as a toll-free highway. But that was more of like a quick flirtation that never really stood much of a chance. The part of the highway that did stand a chance was the section up to Lockport. They got as far as Millersport Highway north of Amherst in the early 90s, and it's stopped there ever since. Every once in a while, you'll hear a rumble or two about possibly considering an extension north along Millersport Highway to Transit Road, but this would still be a few miles south of Lockport if they ever built it that far. I don't see that happening either, so I think we're kind of stuck with what we got at this point. So you'll have this beautiful stub to look at for who knows how long, you know.
I'd say build a parking right on it.
Well, I guess they could. I don't know who would use it, but they could do that. I've been doing these webinars now for 4 years, something like that. I think I did the first one in 2019. And I have been waiting all this time to use perhaps my favorite road sign in North America on a slide. So I know that this isn't an American issued sign, and I know it's probably not even, I don't even think it's in use anymore. I think Quebec phased it out. We have to use the angry cloud on this slide when talking about what is probably my favorite urban drive in Western New York. And, you know, if you polled people, I think you would find that a lot of people find this road to be it's right up there with the best urban drives in New York State. And yeah, I am including New York City in this. It's a great drive.
If you think the blowing cloud is funny, what about the tipping truck in Washington State?
Yeah, I don't remember that one.
You'll see it.
Well, I'm sure that if I saw a picture of it, I would remember it, but I don't remember that one off the top of my head.
Okay, when you go there, you'll see it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna drive Stevens Pass in early July, so I'm assuming I'm gonna see one or two of those there.
You'll see it on the I-5 going up to BC.
Okay. Skyway is a dinosaur. It was built, as were a bunch of the highways in Buffalo. It was built in the mid-50s. It was opened in 1955. Again, this is a highway that's largely unchanged. At least the elevated part downtown is unchanged. There were some improvements made over the years south of town, through Lackawanna, for instance, and then there was a project in 2008 which lowered the roadway to grade, as well as made other improvements to the local streets in the area. But by and large, the highway's dimensions are largely what they were in the 1950s. This is one of the only highways in New York State where you will see signs like this in the upper left and upper right. The sign in the upper right is brand new this year. It was not here when I was in town last fall. Interesting that they're going with the all-white and keeping the all-white shield for Route 5, which I think is a little odd. But so that is new. The sign on the upper left, that's the more traditional look that I've been used to for the last 15 years. I have seen those lights illuminated before. Usually it's in the winter months that you'll see that happen. It's usually for either high winds or snowfall. Because remember, even though Buffalo is kind of, the city of Buffalo itself is it's kind of both. It's in the line of fire for lake effect snow, and it's not. Most of the heavy lake effect snows fall south of town, but you will get snow bands that do make their way up this far. Heavy snow bands at that. you can get a couple feet of snow without much effort, if that ever happens. If one of those big bands develops. So yeah, it's mainly you'll see that in the winter. I don't think we have to worry about that next month. I hope not. So that's the story with the blinky lights, and I think that one of the great money shots in all of New York State is this one. You are going to get your chance to get your own picture of this. I think there have been 3 meets in Buffalo dating back to 2003, I want to say. Because Doug was kind enough to share with me some of the records of the older meets that were pre-forum, that were like put together over MTR and stuff like that. And none of the 3 meets involve a drive on the Skyway northbound. So that'll be a first. Or this meet will be a first for that. I really do think that if you're going to come to this meet, you really ought to get this picture. Like this is, if there's one picture you got to get, I think it's this one. And as I said, it's a heck of a drive. The Skyway structure itself has not changed a whole lot since it was put up in the mid-50s. There has been on again, off again talk about removing the Skyway and replacing it with an at-grade highway of some sort, or relocating the Route 5 freeway elsewhere. The latest push came in 2020 and 2021. There were a bunch of renderings put out. I will not waste your time by posting them here. Basically, the short version of it is that there wasn't really anything that was too compelling for anybody to commit to. And the removal concept for the Skyway was put on the shelf, quote-unquote, indefinitely 2 years ago. And I've not heard anything new about it since then. So I don't expect this thing to be going away anytime soon. So even if you don't make it to the meet, don't worry about it. You probably got a bunch of years still to enjoy this. Here's another... I'm so glad I bought a drone 3 years ago. Have I said that?
No, I don't think you mentioned that.
Yeah, I haven't said that yet?
No.
No.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
You have a drone?
I do. Yeah.
Wow.
So, it allows you to get pictures like this. So I can put them in the PowerPoint, and then you people can be like, ooh, how'd you get that picture?
See,
Ah.
Well, one day I hope to be able to do that. The wonders of technology.
It's amazing.
By the way, I see Mark joining in the chat. I meant to do this at the start, and I forgot. I want to take a second to congratulate the folks who attended the Little Rock Road Meet today in Arkansas. I think that was Cody who put that one together. So to everybody who traveled out that way for that one, I hope you guys had a great time. Hope it was fun. There's been some nasty weather down that way the last few days. So I hope that everybody got there safe and is going to get home safe the next day.
They did stop at the damn bridge.
What's that?
They did stop at the damn bridge.
What stopped?
They stopped in by the damn bridge.
Well, I don't know which bridge you're talking about.
The damn bridge.
Oh, are you talking about? I know what he's talking about. Well, that's not a dam, though, is it? That's a... Well, maybe it is. I don't know. There's a lock there in the Arkansas River, but I don't know if...
It's a combo.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it's a pedestrian bridge that they built on top of whatever you want to call that.
Yeah. And you can make all the damn jokes you want.
Yeah, I know you'll do that. I did get to see that, by the way, when I was in Little Rock in February. So that's a nice little spot there that they got. The name of that escapes me. I know it has a name, but I can't remember what it is offhand. Anyway, back to Buffalo. The 33, aka the Kensington Expressway. Now, one of the things that was pretty clear when they were drawing up the plans for the highway system after World War II is that they had to have a highway that connected downtown with the airport. And this highway accomplished just that. Between downtown and the airport, it connects with the 198 expressway, which we'll talk about in a moment. It has an interchange with I-90 out in the eastern suburbs. It did quite a number on a couple of areas of town that we should talk about here. The Humboldt Parkway, which was originally part of the old Delaware Park system. It was a tree-lined boulevard. Very bucolic. There are pictures online. I didn't include any of them in the slideshow, but if you Google like old pictures of Humboldt Parkway, you'll see what I'm talking about. It was just a beautiful green space that was mown down to make way for this highway. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. I also want to mention for a second the Fruit Belt, which is another neighborhood that was basically split in half by the construction of this highway. The Fruit Belt gets its name from the German American immigrants who originally settled the area, and there were a lot of fruit trees along the side streets, and all the streets in the Fruit Belt actually have the names of fruits. In the years after World War II, the original immigrant population was gradually replaced with a more African American centric population as deindustrialization happened. And this was around the same time when planners got the idea to just carve up the Fruit Belt as part of this 33 Expressway project. So the stretch of the highway south from the Humboldt Parkway to the Oak and Elm arterial largely cuts through what was the old Fruit Belt neighborhood. Now, the original expressway construction in the 1960s between the 198 and, say, Best Street makes the use of an open trench that was, again, replacing the original Humboldt Parkway design. It effectively split that existing neighborhood in half. Now they had an open trench in the middle of their neighborhood. And in recent years, there's been a push to do something about that beyond just improving, pedestrian access and bike lanes and all that stuff. The talk of either demolishing the highway entirely or placing a cap over portions of the highway. As we cycle through some pictures here, these are of the, this is Elm Street northbound coming off of 190, and this is Oak Street on the lower right as you pass by the ballpark and approach 190. I'll finish my thought on the parkway in a second here, but here's the at the end of the expressway, you go through a traffic light and you go straight onto the access road for Buffalo Airport, and so that's where these signs are located. I thought they were kind of cool and should be included here.
They definitely look like airport signage.
Well, that's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons why I like documenting all the airport access roads, is because when you are driving around and you're looking for stuff that's quote unquote non-standard, your best bet of finding that is on an airport property because they don't have to really follow the official standards.
Not following standards and like that is like this is not Buffalo related, but when I drove around Minneapolis' airport in 21 or 22 last year when going to Hawaii, they had so many LED signs on the airport's property. It was just pitiful.
Yeah, well, that's more to do with like lane control, isn't it?
It is, because let's say a parking garage is closed, then they had to reroute people.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, back to Buffalo.
Yeah, so the original construction in the 60s created a condition like this, where the highway is below grade. The original Humboldt Parkway was moved over to the side, where it's now the frontage road in each direction. Momentum appears to have built for a cap to be built over this section of the highway. And this would include basically putting the highway underground artificially by putting precast panels over the top of it and just backfilling, a new green space on top of it. By doing this, they could then move the Humboldt Parkway as it was originally built back to some semblance of its original form in the 1930s. There is some question as to how effective such a move will be, given the cost will be well over $1 billion to execute this plan. There are a lot of people who suggest that this plan doesn't go far enough. There are some people who suggest that the vision of the green space is problematic, considering that there's no way that you can grow tall trees on top of a precast cap. Because, as some of you know, trees require a root system that's proportionate to its height, I think. So tall trees like the ones that were originally on Humboldt Parkway require root systems that are just not possible if you build a cap. Here is... And there are a lot of different renderings online. I just picked out the ones that I thought were the most interesting, that kind of get to the point of it all. You can see how this would kind of be transformed into a bi-level system with the original parkway restored on the top and the expressway retained in the concrete cap underneath. Again, this is subject to change. It's even subject to cancellation, because even though there's funding that's been set aside for it, there has yet to be official approval for construction. I think there are supposed to be public meetings in the next 2 months between June and July of this year. And I think we'll kind of get a better timetable of construction based off of those. But for now, that's kind of what we've got, and that appears to be the direction that we're heading.
You can imagine if they tried to do anything, it'd probably go, unfortunately, the way of the inner loop in Rochester.
Well, they have looked into full removal. But I think that one of the problems is that this road carries so much traffic and there's no other real place to put it, that removing it is almost a non-starter. I mean, you can downgrade it to a boulevard, but you still have to deal with all the traffic that's there. You're not... The downgrading to a boulevard creates a bigger problem, because now it involves all the high-speed traffic that you had, which was once separate. Now you're putting all that traffic on the same level as, local cross traffic and pedestrians and all that nonsense.
Yep.
So, and we're going to see how this works out exactly in places like Syracuse, with what they're going to do downtown. All of these cities are going to basically be giant test tubes to try out new ways of, moving traffic within a downtown area. So time will tell, but I think that they made the right choice in retaining the highway. Retaining the highway. Well, some people in North Buffalo want to get rid of this one too. By the way, let's take a quick pop quiz here. Who knows how to pronounce this?
I'm going with it. I don't know.
Skajekwada.
I'm very impressed. The guy from Wisconsin got it right. How about that?
We probably have a lot of weird things like that in Wisconsin, I feel like.
There's
I don't know,
a few.
There's some American.
Well, you could have done something like Jake Cullen or something like that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so...
Is it the same Native American language?
Well, that I don't know. That you could research that.
It's far enough away that I'm willing to bet it's not.
Well, anyway.
More likely that they're Chippewa here, but I don't know what they are in the New York area.
Yeah, this would be Iroquois.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll tell you how that first word is pronounced. 198. Because that's what people call it. Okay.
Yeah, that 198.
Yeah, just go with that. It's easier. You don't have to worry about all that other nonsense.
Not just 198, the 198.
Yeah. This is another pre-interstate era classic. It's not a full freeway. There is one traffic light on it. It's not at Main Street. It's one of the cross streets that it comes to. For some reason, I don't have in my notes which street that is. Somebody in the chat will tell me. But there is a single traffic light on it. It is mostly a freeway, but again, it was built in the early 50s. It was routed through Delaware Park, part of it. And so that's a motivation for making it as narrow and windy as it is. That's also a motivation of why people want to get rid of it. Another reason for getting rid of it was what used to be its high speed limit. It used to be a 50-mile-an-hour thoroughfare. The speed limit was lowered in 2015 down from as high as 55. It's now a 30-mile-an-hour highway. Although,
Which means people still do 55.
well, I was going to say, you wouldn't necessarily know that it's a 30-mile-an-hour road based on how people drive it.
There's no place for cops to pull people over.
So
Sure.
this whole thing was controversial when it happened. I know that a lot of people in road enthusiasm raised hell about this when it happened. Basically, the gist of it was that a car traveling, I think, westbound, right about where the picture on the lower left is, lost control, veered off the road. There's a pedestrian greenway that runs along the highway on the right, and he struck and killed. But he struck a couple of people. He killed one person. I think there was a child who was killed. And so in the immediate aftermath of that, the state got involved. They descended from upon high and said, well, we're going to make this a 30-mile-an-hour highway, and we're going to make it permanent, and we're not going to really give any thought to any other alternative.
Thanks,
That's the
Paul.
short version of it. Now, since then, since 2015, yeah, there's been talk about doing something about the highway, even eliminating all the freeway components of it and just making it a straight boulevard with all at-grade intersections. Or even completely just removing the road outright and restoring the original Skidjackwada Creek through Delaware Park. These ideas, although they are well-meaning, I do think that they are a bit more ambitious than what is realistic. Again, you're dealing with a road that has a lot of traffic on it. This isn't just a main thoroughfare through Delaware Park. It's also a main east-west thoroughfare for North Buffalo, the Elmwood area. Buffalo State College is right off of the highway in this area. There's a lot of traffic here, and it also serves as a feeder route into 190 in Black Rock. I'll show you some of the renderings just for what's in giggles, so you can see what some people have talked about doing. Like in this upper left rendering, introducing roundabouts into the equation, kind of reversing or reinstating the original parkway look of some of the highway, restoring the original creek to what it was prior to construction. I mean, all this stuff has kind of been on the table from time to time, but nothing has really taken hold. And anyway, at this point, all the efforts of East Buffalo are wrapped up in the cap over the 33. So, as long as that's on people's minds front and center, I don't see anything else really taking hold. But this is something that's also been out there from time to time.
Well, it's done, of course, if they do it.
All right, real quick, let's talk about a couple other highways, and then we'll move into some other stuff. 219, the next two highways we're going to talk about are largely children of the 1970s, as the ex-urban movement really started in Erie County. So we have the 219, which starts at exit 55 on the Thruway near Lackawanna and heads south towards Springville. It's also the major highway that gets you to the Bills Stadium in Orchard Park, so I know Bills Mafia likes that road a lot. I want to mention, because I was in school when this happened, and it was a big deal in the civil engineering department as a result, the Springville bypass section of 219, which was completed in 2011. I think it was opened in December of 2011. It reached final completion the following year. The continuation of the highway from Route 39 in Springville over the Cattaraugus Creek into, it's not Erie County, it's Cattaraugus County down there, I think, on the other side of the creek. The extension was conceived in the mid-2000s. It was built from 2007 to 2011. The project was originally estimated to cost about $85 million. The cost ballooned to over $125 million because of geological issues. So, for instance, what you're looking at on the upper left is what was built. They were originally hoping to just put a rock cut in and just scale the slopes like this. They ended up having to basically dig out the whole valley because they found that due to landslides and unstable soils that they weren't expecting to encounter, that jacked up the price of construction by about $40 million. So for $125 million, you get about, I don't even think it's 5 miles. It's like 4 and change. To get you basically to the next exit, which is Peters Road, which ends at a stub. The thinking around the mid-2000s was that there was starting to be some momentum for extending the highway even further south to link up potentially with I-86 in the area of Salamanca. In the years since this section's completion, the idea of doing so has really become unpopular for a number of reasons. It's not just engineering-related reasons. And so it's likely that what we see today is what we're going to be stuck with for the foreseeable future. The centerpiece of the new extension that bypasses Springville is this very handsome twin-span arch bridge over Cattaraugus Creek, just south of Springville. They were completed in 2011 as part of the expressway's construction. Two of the most appealing two of the most appealing structures in all of Western New York, in my opinion. But they are here, and they don't get, well, they get the traffic that they were supposed to get, but the problem is that the interchange at the end of the highway is like right off the end of this bridge, so it's kind of, they bypassed Springville and they built a new bridge over the creek, and that's basically all that they really accomplished here. But anyway, I'm grateful for the new bridges. I think they're very pretty. We'll talk about the 400 real quick. This is Thruway exit 54, if you're keeping score at home. That's where this highway begins, and it kind of runs in a southeasterly direction, in the direction of East Aurora, which is another bedroom community of Buffalo. There are company headquarters for corporations such as Fisher-Price and Moog in this area. And some of the interchanges on 400 were built in order to please those two companies. Specifically, the interchanges for, Jameson Road and Maple Street. Those two interchanges.
I didn't know a cat lived there.
Yeah, how'd that cat get up there? I wonder what that's an Easter egg for.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's go check in Connecticut.
I don't know what he's doing this weekend. I don't know why he's not here, but anyway. We had to make sure that he got in the show somehow. So Anthony's cat whose name is Aurora. That's why that's the joke. That's why the cat is in there. I spent way too much time on Facebook looking for a picture of his cat, by the way.
I'm impressed you knew and remembered the cat's name to even think about it.
Yeah, I don't even know how I got the idea for that. It was just one of those random things I came up with because I'm a lunatic like that.
Carefully.
Yeah, so anyway.
Also, the only highway named after Sleeping Beauty. She was Princess Aurora.
I see.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say, like, she's not Princess 400, is she?
No.
Disney hasn't got quite that crazy yet.
Well, hey, give them time.
You
know what?
I said yet.
They'll get there. Don't worry. They've already ruined Star Wars for me, so I'm sure they'll ruin some other stuff, too, before it's all said and done.
I'm sure they will.
Erie, Buffalo. I didn't know there was a city in Buffalo.
Yeah, well, yeah, they like to... I guess that's one of those things where they only had so much room on the sign, so they were like, well, crap, we gotta jam all this in here, but...
Sounds like I-40 in California had that phone water.
Yeah. Niagara Falls is not a part of this presentation, but I feel like I owe it to you to mention some of the stuff that you can find either in Falls, USA, or Falls, Canada, or Fort Erie, Canada. The QEW is the main highway that connects the Peace Bridge at Fort Erie with Toronto by way of St. Catharines and Hamilton. Contrary to what you might think, the highway is not named for the recently departed monarch of the UK. The highway is named for Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. The highway was opened in 1940, I believe. The original highway. I mean, the highway today doesn't really look a whole lot like the original highway, but it was Canada's first superhighway, so I'm obliged to tell you about it. Other King's highways in this part of Ontario, the 405 connects the QEW with the Queenston-Lewiston Bridge, which on the American side becomes I-190. Similar deal with the 420, which connects the QEW with downtown Niagara Falls, Canada, and the Rainbow Bridge. And then 406 starts at the QEW and works its way south through St. Cat's and along the Welland Canal in the direction of Port Colborne. 406 is a nice drive. Really, that whole section of Ontario, like around the Welland Canal. If you have some time and you're in the area, and you're feeling brave enough to cross the border, I would recommend checking out the Welland Canal. There's a lot of interesting stuff along there. A lot of old bridges. There's a couple of tunnels underneath the canal as well. The Town Line Tunnel and the Thorold Tunnel. So there's some interesting stuff. I mean, hell, there's enough out there to host a road meet. Really, I don't know that there's ever been one over there, but that wouldn't be a bad idea for a meet either. Let's see, what else we got here? Back in the U.S., the 425 is the Twin Cities Highway. This starts at I-290 at exit 2 and runs north as a divided highway through Tonawanda and into North Tonawanda. Niagara Scenic Parkway was known for a number of years as the Robert Moses State Parkway. That road's got an interesting history in its own right, and it's kind of a shame that we're shoving it into the honorable mentions, but it runs along the Niagara Riverfront, basically from the south side of Niagara Falls it used to run all the way through downtown Niagara Falls, but now it peters out. There's two different sections of it. It reappears on the north side of town, and it runs all the way up to Fort Niagara from there. I mentioned before the outer loop and what happened to that. Parts of the 179 in the Lackawanna Orchard Park area were built as part of the original idea for the outer loop, as was what's called the LaSalle Expressway, which starts at 190 in the Niagara Falls area and heads east for a couple of miles before it dead ends east of town. Somebody was mentioning in chat which highway was kind of responsible for instigating the Love Canal environmental disaster. That was that one. Because of how they built it on an embankment, it trapped all the chemicals that had been previously leaching into the Niagara River, and it kind of backfilled them or backwashed them into the neighborhood. So that's kind of how people ended up with chemicals in their basements, and that's how that whole disaster started. So
I guess that's why we require clean fill nowadays.
This is why we can't have nice things anymore,
exactly.
Apparently. Yeah. All right, I kind of went over this already, but I'll recap unbuilt highways. We showed you these graphics at the beginning of the program. I guess it depends on which map you're looking at, but most of the proposed highways, either from the 1946 original plan or from a subsequent plan in the 50s, did see construction. The map on the right is pretty useful for color coding everything, at least up until like 1970. Like the Aurora Expressway, which is Route 400, and the Southern Expressway, which is Route 219, those all saw construction. But pretty much everything else there remains a dotted line to this day. And again, I mentioned this before, but I'll recap for you real quick the plan for the inner loop around Buffalo, which would have kind of started at 190 exit 8 and kind of gone through Allentown before reaching an interchange with the end of 33, and then incorporating an upgrade of the Oak Elm arterial on the east side of downtown to form a circle, along with the existing 190, which did see construction in the 1950s. Okay. And one final look at the regional view of things. So, all right. How are we doing on time here? Well, we're going way over time tonight, I think, unfortunately. I hate to do this to people, but I really do want to cover all of this stuff because a lot of it you're going to see on Meet Day, and I want to make sure that I get this stuff out there so that people know what they're looking at ahead of time. All right, let's deal with Buffalo River first. we talked about the Skyway already, so I'm going to start with the next bridge upriver from that, and we'll work upriver from there. So, first on the list is the Michigan Avenue Bridge, which was the site of a pretty infamous catastrophe that took place in January 1959, known as the Tewksbury Incident. And I'm going to quote from an article here that describes what happened. The short version of it is that a freighter collided with the bridge and the bridge collapsed.
They tend to do that when you run into them.
Yeah, that it's funny you say that. I have noticed that pattern myself over the years. The Tewksbury incident remains an unforgettable event to those who lived through it on January 21st, 1959. After days of extreme cold and heavy snow packed the Buffalo River and Casanova Creek, with ice, a sudden thaw and wind-driven rain on the 21st of January broke up the ice, and there was an ice dam that broke. I'm just kind of paraphrasing here now. It swept a couple of freighters downriver, the force of the water did. It's kind of amazing that the freighters made it as far down the river as they did, because if you look at an aerial view of the Buffalo River, it's got a lot of oxbow bends in it that you wouldn't think that freighters who had just broken loose from an ice jam would be able to navigate all of that. And of course, it was the middle of winter, so these freighters were not manned. They broke from their moorings and were sent downstream in the torrent. One of the ships, known as the Michael K. Tewksbury, was the ship that was in the lead of the two ships that broke free. And the Tewksbury collided with the Michigan Avenue Bridge, and the bridge collapsed. It turns out that the crew who was supposed to be keeping watch at the Michigan Avenue Bridge was on break at the time. There were folks who were in the neighboring Swanee house having a drink, and so they couldn't raise the bridge in time. Also, apparently, the guy who was in charge, the lead bridge keeper, was off duty hanging out with a nice lady at the time as well.
In
doing
all fairness,
God knows what.
It typically takes a fair amount of time to raise those bridges. Even if they saw the freighter, they still may not have had enough time to get it up. And unmanned, I don't know how fast an unmanned freighter is moving down river, but they still may not have had time to get it up in time to actually prevent the collision.
Yeah, but they don't include that information in the reports.
Yeah. Well, the fact that they were on duty was enough to blame those people. So
Yeah.
Yes,
whether
yes.
right or not, that they were the easy target of people's scorn in the aftermath of this.
And they did do something wrong.
There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
hanging out with a nice lady. What are you talking about?
When you're on shift, there is.
I
Well,
guess it
he was
depends on
up,
what
too.
you're doing, huh?
Right.
Well, the guy hanging out with a young lady was off duty. The ones drinking weren't.
I guess that was their version of having a good time. I don't know. Unfortunately, it's funny that if this had never happened, we would have never found out about what they were doing off duty, right? So that's the kind of risk that you take, I guess. So anyway, the bridge that stands today was the replacement of the bridge that was wrecked in the Tewksbury incident. It was completed in 1962. The bridge that... Okay, so there are a lot of people in South Buffalo who are not happy right now, and it has to do with the bridge closed signs that you see. This is going to be the third summer out of the last 4 that either this bridge or the next bridge I'm going to talk about has been closed to traffic for the full summer. Now, there are 2 bridges that they're in relative proximity to one another. If you have to close one, it's not too difficult to reroute all the traffic that's going down this way to the other one, which is what they're doing again this year. But the people who operate the Riverworks Entertainment Complex are not happy because the Michigan Avenue Bridge, a lot of people like to walk over that bridge to get to Riverworks from downtown. And all of a sudden, Riverworks is not within walking distance anymore. So...
Is there a reason they close it, or they just don't want to hire operators?
No, it's to do with structural repairs. That's what they keep saying.
Okay.
This year they're doing substructure repairs this summer, which obviously you can't do in the winter because this
Yeah.
freezes over in the winter. But like this, it's just one of those weird things where they keep saying that they're gonna finish. They keep saying that they are done, and then they come back 6 months later and are like, "Oh, we got to do this now." So
It seems like they should be able to do some of it at night or stage it or something to, at least have the bridge open on the weekends when.
Well, so with the latest Michigan Avenue closure, which is going to affect us, I was going to take you guys over both of these bridges, but I can't now because the Michigan Avenue is closed.
I guess we could walk across and climb.
Well, so you'll be able to. So for this picture in the upper left, you'll be able to get this picture.
Erica, go ahead and do it.
You can get a selfie with this view. That's not bad.
Yeah.
We could climb up it.
So one of the things that they have talked about, and this was discussed not so long ago at a city council meeting, was trying to work out some sort of a schedule where they can have this bridge open for pedestrian use on weekends.
You could actually put a legitimate pedestrian staircase. It would probably be expensive to build, but
but then with ADA involved, you'd have to put an elevator, and nobody wants to mess with that. No. So yeah, there has been talk about possibly compromising a little bit on this, but it's still, either way, it won't remain open for vehicle traffic. Let's see. All right, so the current iteration of the Ohio Street Bridge was completed in 1962. It is the third bridge at this site. The first one goes all the way back to 1866. It is kind of a close relative of the Michigan Avenue Bridge because they are both vertical lift bridges. As I said, I was gonna take you guys over both of these bridges on meet day, but that's not gonna be possible. But you will be able to get pictures of both of them. You just won't be able to. Well, I guess you could theoretically drive over the Ohio Street Bridge on meet day, but it's not actually on the route. It's right next to where the route is gonna go. Real quick, we got a few railroad bridges here that I want to touch on that were built all within roughly the same time of each other. The CSX CP1 bridge. These you really aren't going to be able to see on the meet tour, but I'll just make you aware that they exist, and if you find yourself in the area and want to check them out, you can certainly do that. These are all Strauss lift bridges that were built in the early 1900s, like around 1913 through 15. Some of them remain in use today, others are not in use. Here's an example of a bridge complex where you have one of each. Again, this is a project from like 1915 is when these were built. The bridge that remains in use is on the CSX main line that connects Buffalo with Cleveland, so there's a lot of train traffic on this bridge. The second bridge was abandoned in I want to say it was around 1970. This is I really should have done this. I really should have put this PowerPoint together sooner. Had I known that the Bridge Hunter website was going to go down, I would have done a lot more of the research into these, because I seem to remember there being a lot more information on them on that site than what I've been able to find on any other site. But and also about this bridge too, which there's basically no information on. It's the mystery bridge, as I like to call it, because there's really not a whole lot of information out there on this. The Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad ran its main line over this bridge in the early 1900s, starting in around 1910. This was another old bascule bridge, similar in design to the ones that we've seen here, but it was a bit smaller in size. It also served trains that served the Old Republic Steel. The Old Republic Steel site, which is now the site of a Tesla Gigafactory along South Park Avenue.
It's a cool picture.
Yeah, the wonders of drone technology, right?
You could have told me you walked out on it, and I would have believed you on the bottom left.
It's funny you say that. Not on this occasion, but in years past, when I was an undergrad at UB, I did do that once.
I totally would.
These old bridge abutments are located on Smith Street. They are connected to the DL and W main line. The meat tour isn't going to go by them directly, but we'll be within a couple of blocks of them. So if you like old bridge abutments, these are at the foot of Smith Street at Red Jacket Park. If you're into that kind of stuff, it might be worth a couple minutes of your time to check out. And lastly, we have the South Park Avenue Bridge, again, a relative of the Michigan Avenue and Ohio Street bridges. It was built around the same time. This one was built around 1955. Again, on the south end of this bridge is where you'll find the Tesla Gigafactory. We are going to drive over this bridge on the tour. This is it is not US Route 62 at this point. It becomes US 62 further south. But it is part of South Park Avenue. All right. Niagara River. Real quick, I'll run through these. We don't have that many to do. Peace Bridge. Okay. Where the hell are the rest of my notes here? Okay. Peace Bridge. One of the automobile bridges connecting the city of Buffalo and Western New York in general, with the southeastern Ontario region, Fort Erie, Niagara Falls, that area. This bridge was built in 1927. Its longest spans are 425 feet apiece. It was named and dedicated in honor of 100 years of peace and prosperity between the United States and Canada, obviously in the aftermath of the War of 1812. This is a bridge, so when I arrived in college, they were kind of talking about doing this, and it kind of died a quiet death shortly after I arrived. I don't know if I jinxed it or what, but there was a plan to build a new bridge here. And this really was popular in like the early to mid 2000s. First they were looking at building a parallel bridge, and then they were looking into replacing the bridge outright.
Oh.
Yeah. So this was the replacement idea. And this was like 2005, 2006, about when this came out.
Not gonna lie, I kind of like the old one better.
Yeah, this is one thing that kind of came to a head.
Too much.
It does strike people as being a little too flashy and a little too
futuristic.
Not even that. It's just
It's a cable stay
It's
bridge.
too much for the area.
Well, it's too much for the area. It's too flamboyant, I would say. That was one thing that people would say. And in the end, they decided against it because, between the traffic predictions and also considering the fact that the bridge that's there was still in pretty good shape in 2006. They did put in hundreds of millions of dollars into rehabilitation in the years after this idea. The old bridge is just fine. Structurally, and it's an international crossing, so you're going to have issues with traffic, but that really doesn't have anything to do with the bridge necessarily. The cable stay idea kind of died a quiet death right around the time that I was getting into college there. And I don't expect there to be any new push for a new bridge at this site anytime soon. Here's another bridge. So we're not going to go over the Peace Bridge on Meat Day, obviously. If you do want to take the optional stop to Broderick Park, we will cross over this bridge. There's another. There are a lot of these old lift bridges in town still, and a lot of them are still active. What makes this one unique to some extent is that it's one of the only ones of this design that's open to automobile traffic. It stands at the foot of Ferry Street. It crosses the Black Rock Canal, which is part of the Erie Canal corridor. This bridge goes back to 1913 when the original 1833 era Black Rock Canal infrastructure was replaced and updated with a deeper and wider channel. There's also a new lock at the north end of this stretch across from Unity Island that was built as part of that. And so as part of that canal modernization, they put this bridge in to replace a previous bridge that had been there before. And it is still active today. I don't know how many times it has to lift over the course of a month or a year, but I have seen pictures of it recently where it is in the up position. Okay. International Railroad Bridge. So there are a couple of railroad bridges that connect Erie and Niagara counties with Canada. This is one of them. The other one is up in Niagara Falls itself. The International Railroad Bridge here in Buffalo was originally built in 1873. The superstructure that you see today is largely from around the year 1900. The entire superstructure was replaced with heavier steel and a heavier superstructure to accommodate heavier trains. But they put the new superstructure atop of the original foundations and piers. So it's kind of a bit of both. There are elements of this that go back as far as 1873, but most of what you see is from the 20th century. As well as the new superstructure, a new swing span was put over the Black Rock Canal. That was completed in 1909. That's what you see in the lower right here. Also, this is where I-190 kind of ducks underneath the railroad. So you can kind of see that in the foreground also. Oh, and I do want to mention real quick, because I didn't mention it with the last bridge. So the International Bridge and the bridge on Ferry Street cross the Niagara River at a point called Unity Island. Unity Island, let me say that again. Because of its position on the international border, it was a very critical point in the Underground Railroad prior to the Civil War. A lot of escaping slaves made their way to Buffalo and Black Rock and made their way across Niagara River into Canada. There were ferries, quote unquote. I mean, they probably weren't called ferries, but that was how people got across into Canada, was gathering in Buffalo or Black Rock and catching a boat to the other side of the river. So there's actually, if you make it to Broderick Park, there are new plaques and memorials to the Underground Railroad that weren't there when I was in school. So, there's been a lot more heightened awareness of, the history of civil rights, as we know, in the last few years. And so that's something that I'm happy that they're finally acknowledging in public, because that was something that had been known for a long time, but there wasn't really any public, display of it. So that's something else to think about. And lastly, I will tell you about one of the bridges on 190 that connects with Niagara Falls. This one is at the south end of Grand Island. It connects Tonawanda with Grand Island. It was built originally, the southbound bridge was the first one to be built. They are near identical twin spans. The southbound bridge was built in 1935. The northbound bridge was completed in 1963 as part of the I-190 construction. Both bridges are toll bridges. By that I mean the South and the North Grand Island bridges are. And so those tolls have remained in place. The tolls, I don't think I mentioned this when we talked about 190 originally, but the tolls at the City Line Plaza northbound and the Black Rock Toll Plaza southbound were original toll booths dating to the 190's construction in the late 50s. And those were, and I was in Buffalo when they were still active, so I can say that I paid the toll at least once at those two plazas. But they were removed in 2006, and they were removed shortly thereafter. The tolls here for the bridges remain active, and the original toll booths for these were replaced with electronic gantries around, I want to say, 2018, somewhere around there.
You weren't part of that project, were you?
No, so that was not part of the statewide cashless program. Before they did that project, they wanted to do the cashless conversion for the other bridges in the state. So the Grand Island bridges, the Tappan Zee Bridge they did, the toll plazas in Westchester County, so like New Rochelle on 95 and Yonkers on 87. They did the cashless conversion with those first, And so that this dates to that initial wave from like 2016 through 18. And then they did the main line Thruway and the Berkshire Spur as part of the whole statewide conversion.
Hmm.
Oh, mercy. We made it to the end of this PowerPoint. Ugh. I recognize that we did go a little long with this, but as I said, there was a lot to get to, and I wanted to make sure that people got as much of an overview to the city as they possibly could. So that was kind of my thinking behind this. But I hope you enjoyed the PowerPoint portion of the program. We have some time here for video. I kind of want to cap this at like 3 hours. I don't want to go over that. So I will show you guys. We'll do a few videos, and then I've got an epilogue that I want to show you guys on PowerPoint at the end of the program. And we'll do that after the video portion. So, you taking off, Chief?
Yeah.
All right. Well,
It's gotten to be that time.
it's that time.
That's
Yep.
Alrighty.
good stuff.
Yeah, good seeing you too. Really looking forward to this meet.
Yeah. See you in July, young man.
Yeah.
All right. Let's. What do I
Exactly.
wanna- See, it's always hard to figure out what the hell I should show people on these shows.
Show them everything.
Well, I see, but I don't want to be here
Keep
and.
it to 3 hours. You have enough time to show them everything in Buffalo.
That is the joke that goes around every once in a while. Yep. All right. The sound is muted. Let's do. All right. I need a quick voice break for a few minutes. While we do that, I will show you the drive on the Skyway into downtown, which is a drive that we will take on Meet Day. I'm going to show you a few things in video form. Some of them will be on the tour, some of them will not. But this should give you a good idea of what the city has to offer. So, I need a voice break. I need a refill of my Tim Hortons coffee, too.
The important things in life.
Yes.
What's he gonna have? Black label scotch?
Scott, while I'm away for a couple minutes, maybe you could tell people about your Wisconsin. You're not going to Wisconsin. You live in Wisconsin. That road
Right.
trip that you're taking soon.
Yeah, that's probably the reason why I will not likely be at the road meet. So I'm flying over to Calgary next week and starting on Highway 2 going up to Edmonton. Just basically taking the east access route of the Alaska Highway, which is basically Highway 43 up to Dawson Creek. And from there, I'll be picking up the Alaska Highway full all the way up to Fairbanks. And hoping that the route is still open. It looks promising because they did some prescribed burns in order to alleviate the risk of the Tiny Creek Fire crossing over it and closing the road, meaning that I'd had a backup of going around through the Northwest Territories. But it sounds like that's going to be promising to take the original route, but I had to wait till last minute. But it's going to be quite the drive, and it's going to involve some 14-hour days at times behind the wheel. And from there, I'll be stopping in Denali for a few days, stopping in Anchorage for a few days, and then zigzagging back down through other means like top of the world highway through Dawson City and the Cassio Highway down in the middle of British Columbia. Did I mention anything about stopping at Banff? Yes, I did. What's your plan, Bill? Oh, wait.
I don't think Bill's doing anything.
No, I didn't have any solid plans.
Yeah, so that's the short end of the stick. I'll give you the long end over photos. But yeah, with all the fires that are happening in Canada, it's just so unpredictable right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Scott, if you If you run into anything unusual in the state of Alaska, I'm sure you'll let me know. Because I'm going to be right behind you by a couple weeks.
Nice.
Not even that. How long are you staying in Alaska for?
7, 8 days.
So you're coming home when?
I will be back in Canada on the 1st of July and eventually back into Alberta by the 7th.
Yeah, so we will have missed each other by 2 or 3 days.
Where are you flying to? Seattle?
I'm flying to Seattle on the 30th, and then I fly to Anchorage on the 3rd.
Oh, you're just doing a few days in Seattle first and then flying to Anchorage itself.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wanted to break at least one of the directions up a little bit. Here's your money shot, by the way. Yeah, I didn't want to sit on a plane for 11 hours straight. So I figured I would just break it up a little bit. Plus, I wanted a couple of days in Seattle anyway. So, and I'll kind of give you guys a little bit of a teaser. There might actually be an impromptu Seattle road meet that breaks out. So, well, you saw the chatter in our Discord server,
road
right?
meet broke out.
Yeah, I went on a road trip and a road meet broke out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in our Discord server, we were talking the other day, and apparently Steve is going to be in Seattle at the same time as me. Although we had no idea that each other was going to be in the same area. And so now apparently we're all going to the Seattle Mariners game on the 30th. So
Okay.
it's apparently going to be the third Seattle road meet that Steve has hosted.
Being joined by Soundo Bruce.
I was aware of one.
Apparently he did two. That I thought there was just the one, but
Yeah, me too. I was only aware of one.
Yeah,
Well,
so
now you know.
it's funny that the only organized Seattle meets that have ever happened were hosted by him.
Yeah, I
Like
know,
of all
right?
people. So
This is out, you know.
I know. I don't put anything past the guy. You know,
Mm-mm.
I'm too smart for that. So yeah, we're gonna get together in Seattle and we'll see what happens there. And then I go off to Alaska for 5 days and
Now, how many states do you have left after Alaska?
0.
Ditto.
So Alaska is gonna be your 50th.
Yep.
Yeah, we're gonna have 2 new members of the 50 State Club in a couple
Yeah.
weeks. Yep. Yeah, I knocked out the Dakotas over Memorial Day weekend.
Nice.
So, yeah, that was 3 or 4 days of my life I'll never get back.
And I'm going to be
let me just tell you that driving I-29 and I-94 will like make you want to like hate road enthusiasm for the rest of your life. You're like, oh, Jesus Christ, I gotta
yeah,
drive this.
it's like
That bad, huh?
they're not speed demons in North Dakota.
Well, that's another thing that I learned too. Like all of their work zones on their interstates are signed at 40 miles an hour. Yeah, so you go from a speed limit of 75 down to 40, and people in North Dakota obey the 40, literally.
And
Yeah,
one of those
they have
places
pretty
that
speed
is
limits.
signed 40 regardless of work's actually being done or not.
Yes.
I hate that.
Yeah.
Like, I understand making it safe when there's active construction, as in construction workers there, but like when you're in Pennsylvania and that's where they're storing their cones is in the lane. Like, do we really need to slow down?
Yeah, no, they
No, you don't.
no, they just put cones up and they're like, oh, speed limit 40.
Yeah. Like, yes, don't make
It's
it safe
interesting
for
that
workers.
people actually adhere to it, though. That's
Yeah, but North Dakota is a very laid-back state. That's what I've discovered. You know, like it ain't New Jersey. You know, like,
No.
yeah, it's like a
I
whole
was
different
going
world.
up
out there.
29 to drive up to Winnipeg, and as I was going up there, it's like everybody was like going 75 or less, even down to 70.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like really laid back. Even the semis, not the semis. I mean, even the cars. There was hardly a speed demon on the highway,
Yeah.
and there wasn't that much traffic to begin with.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a necessary evil to get the Dakotas out of the way, but I'm glad that I did. So.
Now you got to start knocking off Canada.
Well, you know, in a couple of years or so, I might be running out of places in the U.S. to get to. So I might have to open up my mind to more exploration in Canada.
Yeah, I'll be up to 6 provinces and territories after this year. All I would need is Quebec and the Maritimes.
You've not been to Quebec?
And I haven't been to Quebec. I've only before this year, before 2019, I only went to Ontario.
Oh, all right.
The BC in 19 and Manitoba and Saskatchewan. We took a couple of weeks earlier, and this trip coming up, we'll have Alberta, Yukon, and possibly peeking into the Northwest Territories if I end up being on the main route.
Yeah, the NT is a little bit trickier to get to. You can do it,
Yeah.
but it's kind of out of the way.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're renting a car, yeah, good luck.
Well, yeah, because like, I guess you would be headed towards Yellowknife up that way.
You'd have to go through Alberta to get to Yellowknife.
Yeah. Yeah, and plus that's where all the fires are right now, isn't it?
Alberta is they're not concentrated in Alberta anymore. They're all over the country.
Yeah, no, I know. I saw the map. I guess it was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the whole, like from the Pacific to Hudson Bay is on fire. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Because I mean, Quebec was what smoked you guys out. Yeah, Quebec and Nova Scotia were what smoked you guys out.
Yep.
Ontario and Alberta smoked me out. Yeah, it's just a mess up there. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know. I want to address a couple of questions in the chat real quick. Will the meet be live streamed? No, it will not. I can't host a meet and do a live stream at the same time. I'm sorry.
Like walking and chewing gum.
Well, you know what? I actually can't do that either. So that's not a bad comparison, actually. What did you study at the University of Buffalo? Civil engineering. That was my curriculum of choice.
Everything else would be uncivilized.
Said a certain former Green Bay Packers quarterback.
Yeah. Which one? They both went to the Jets.
Well, I'm talking about the one who went to the Jets first.
Oh. Yeah, he's got his own problem.
Do you know the commercial I'm referring to? That's where I got it from. You probably would recognize it if you saw it.
Yeah, I know what the tagline comes from, but I forget the brand.
Yeah, I want to say it was like Old Spice or something like that.
It is actually.
I'm on the right track, right? Yeah. It's something to do with, not stinking or I don't know, whatever. Anyway.
Nope. Hang on.
Uh-oh. You found something?
Yeah.
Here's a drive through the theater district on one of the sections of Main Street that's recently been open to vehicle traffic. There's a theater district, see?
I was gonna say, we gonna stop and see something?
Yeah, I'll drop you off there, and then I'll keep going. How's that sound?
You go to the baseball game and pick me up at the end?
Yeah, I'll pick. That's what we'll do. By the way, the light rail in Buffalo, which you can see here now, is free to ride above ground.
Will it run you over if you're in the lane when it needs to come past?
Well, I don't know that they're allowed to do that, but I know that it's possible. So, like, here's the first station above ground here. So you could, like, jump on it here at Fountain Plaza and take it all the way down to the arena, and you don't have to pay anything. If you want to ride the below ground part, you do have to have a ticket.
Interesting.
Yep. There are a bunch of hotels, like, in this general area. The hotel I'm staying in is right off of the street that we just went past. So a lot of this is walkable, like from the hotel area down to where the ballpark is, which is in front of the Seneca 1 building and off to our left. You know, that's a walkable thing, or you could just jump on the light rail if there's a train coming by. And then Pearl Street is right in front of Seneca 1 on the right. So, like, there's all this stuff is pretty close to
I was
each
actually
other.
considering
Yes.
taking light rail down to the meet.
Considering?
Yes.
You gotta get your transit groove on, you know?
Yes.
By the way, on the thought of the slogan we were talking about before, right guard.
Yeah, that's it, right guard.
But it's like, okay.
I could have swore it was Old Spice, but it isn't.
It was, yeah, I knew it had something to do with that kind of thing, but, yeah.
And it was Charles Barkley that was a spokesperson for it. And Chuck Norris, apparently. You guys mute yourselves?
We're just taking in the sights.
Ah, yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Dan has stepped out of the room momentarily.
Well, nice. That's the best street, isn't it?
We just have a couple of minutes of awkward silence just now.
Yep.
Pretty much.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when I gotta go take a roadway whiz. You know what? When nature calls, you gotta take care of your business.
Seal, you gotta break the seal.
I ain't even drinking yet. Bill brought a lot of alcohol over. I haven't had any of it yet.
No, he was drinking coffee when I came.
Well, that'll do it to you too.
Well, yeah, but very uncharacteristic like of you, but
yeah, but oh, you know what? I forgot to tell you, and I probably should have told you sooner because it's getting kind of late. But I ain't gonna say where I got it from, but I have a stash of moonshine in my cabinet.
And you didn't share this with us earlier?
And I forgot to. I know, and I'm freaking kicking myself
should've
now because
gone through
I
your
should have. That should have been the first thing I said to you guys.
I should
But
have gone through your cabinets when I
Real.
got here.
Yeah.
Look at me being a nice
Oh,
guest and not going through your stuff.
So Dan, just to bring back something we talked about, dam bridges. It's called the Murray Bridge, also known as the Big Dam Bridge.
They got one of those cheesy ass names for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
It's originally intended to be called Murray Bridge.
Well, that's probably what it was called before some dope got the idea to rename it.
The Big Dam Bridge.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you got a big damn argument about it.
Yeah, now I'm gonna have a big damn headache if we keep talking about this. So.
Uh-oh.
damn right.
You can't have big damn ups like that.
Yeah, so we were just this video was 33 West transitioning onto the Oak Street Arterial. Here's the ballpark on the right, and this is where we make the jump to hyperspace and get on 190 in downtown. If anybody else had questions about the meet, feel free to drop them in the chat. We still have a couple of minutes to take your questions, comments, concerns, all that other good stuff. I do have one last segment I want to get to before we sign off, so as an epilogue, if you will. And then we'll deal with that, and then we'll sign off from there. That's kind of where we're headed at this point.
You cut me off.
All right. Should I show you one more video? I'll show you one more, and then
Do it.
the epilogue won't take very long.
Just do it.
We'll just do it, and you know it'll.
That was Nike.
Well, that one everybody knows what it is. Yeah.
And then also was like a meme.
Sorry, past my bedtime. It will be by the time I get home, I should say.
All right, so this is.
Hey, you're past my bedtime and I'm still here hanging out.
Yeah, you
I was
dope.
up at 4 o'clock this morning.
I was up at 2.
All right, you should go home and go to sleep.
No, you're just weak.
I think you.
I am weak. It's okay.
All right, here's this is 990 northbound. So you can clinch the highest numbered interstate highway in the country for a couple
Ooh,
minutes.
look at that.
Yeah, that truck decided to go in at the last minute there.
Not very good something.
Nah.
Don't be showing any surprises back there, guys.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I was saying, don't show any surprises back there. Not you, them.
Yeah,
They
I'm
walked
not
out.
sure what's going on. They both went outside.
Did that say begin speed limit 65?
I believe so, yes.
Taking a page out of Dubuque, Iowa.
Well, you know, you have state speed limit 55.
Right, of course. That's New York for you.
Yes. But it's still generally widely ignored. It's, you know, whether it's 55 or 65, it's 70, 75.
Quite the opposite of North Dakota, should I say.
Very much so, yes.
Not only North Dakota, but I found that in the prairies of Canada.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have yet to really explore Canada, so I was not aware of this.
At least between Winnipeg and Regina. The city that
I
runs with
suppose I'm
fun.
not, you know, really shocked that it's more laid back in the plains.
No, it isn't. Try to be careful not to get a speeding ticket in Canada, that's for sure.
I was recently in the mountains of the Northeast, and I was keeping my speed down for other reasons, namely wildlife.
Yeah.
I literally had to come to a complete stop on Interstate 93 in New Hampshire for a moose.
The one saying 70 miles an hour on the main line, especially Lackawanna, Erie. Is that in Pennsylvania or New York? Because I know New York is not going to put a 70 limit on.
Absolutely
Well, that would be. That's Pennsylvania you're talking about.
Apparently, they are putting 90 at 70.
Who is?
Pennsylvania.
Oh, it wasn't already.
Well, no, they have that ridiculously actually enforced 55 zone in the Erie area, which
Keep in mind that it still uses the old-fashioned 55 rule from when the 65 rule was put back in 95.
Well, yeah, Pennsylvania has this thing where if it's even remotely populated, it's 55. Even though it's not urban in any stretch of the imagination, it does not matter. The thing about Pennsylvania, though, is generally it's not enforced, except for 90 in the Erie area and 70 east, cardinal direction south of, why am I drawing a blank on the name of this piece of crap town?
There's a lot of those in Pennsylvania. It's okay.
No.
The one with the lights.
Look at this. Apparently in the chat, and Mark mentioned that it was mentioned in the forum that it's in New York that they're putting a 70 zone.
Really?
which is a complete surprise to me personally.
Oh, like the western
The
western
Western
section of
Thruway
90 there? That's interesting.
being 70. That's
Well, they should make the whole.
they need to have the whole thing be 70.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like, if you're gonna make that 70, then make the whole Thruway 70.
Right.
At least
Yeah.
like north of Rockland County.
And and then they could follow in the footsteps of Pennsylvania, where that was where they first cut their teeth with 70.
Right. It was the turnpike that was first, and then
Right.
now it's like all the rural interstates are 70.
Well, yeah. Well, that was we want to raise the gas tax, so we'll also raise the speed limit to 70, and that got voters on board with it.
Yeah. Okay.
It's called piggybacking.
Okay. You still looking into that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll let you do that first. Because I don't want you interrupting my epilogue by saying, "Oh, hey, I found it."
Okay, March 23rd, 2023, debating raising highway speed limit to 70.
Okay,
It is
so
a bipartisan
that's
bill.
all right. So they're debating a bill that
Yep.
would allow it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's not the same thing as saying that they're going to do it.
Link in the chat. It's a
Yeah,
law.
allow it, but don't actually follow through with it. That sounds like Oregon.
Anyway.
Yeah, Oregon. Don't remind me of them.
All right, so to finish out, it's Bill and myself here, and it's Scott on Skype. So it's just the three of us to wrap up. But
Oh, so you chased Eric out?
yeah, I chased her out too. So
Yeah.
'cause
Wow. I've been up since 4. Oh, shut up.
yeah. So
Anyway, moving forward.
it's just the three of us, but I don't think that I'll need the other two. I think I got this last part on my own. So
I hope you do.
guys can just kind of sit back and
I can continue doing the same thing I've been doing for the last 2.5 hours.
well, you can do that too. That's fine. I want to address something before I sign off. On the day of the meet, there's going to be a couple of different documents that you're going to receive. One of them is going to be your standard meet itinerary with turn-by-turn directions and like the usual stuff that you get, But I'm going to do something a little different this year. I really want to include some landmarks as part of the driving tour. Not like to the extent that I'm going out of my way to include them, but you will notice them if you're kind of looking around, and it's kind of part of the peripheral experience of the driving tour. You will see a lot of industrial landmarks along the way, and so I thought that it would be useful to create a supplemental information guide that will kind of get into more of the history of these locations. And so there will be a supplemental document that comes out of this on meet day. So you'll have two different, pieces of information that you'll have at your disposal. So, as I said, I went to college in Western New York. My curriculum of choice was civil engineering. And I don't want to get into like the details of all of this stuff, but let's just say that I did not really have a good go of it. It was not a good time of my life. And this was right around the time when I started picking up a camera and really getting into photography. And the things that I was photographing were not wildflowers and rainbows, if that gives you any kind of an indication. You can see the date and timestamps on some of these pictures. They do go back that far. So I picked up a camera and I started getting into urban photography. That was really my first interest in this medium. Not all of the pictures in this PowerPoint that you're going to see date to that time. A lot of these are from the last 2 to 3 years. But these are all landmarks that I became very familiar with during my time in school because I was, in my spare time I was just kind of out exploring the city and, photographing them and all that. So I thought that this driving tour just might be able to incorporate some of that into it, and so that's kind of what I'm doing. So as part of the supplemental guide, I'll have some other pictures and some other history of the landmarks that I've gotten to know over the years and that you might find some interest in yourselves. So, like this mural here, which was not around when I was in school, and I'm very happy to see that it exists today. The old First Ward, which is a working class neighborhood in South Buffalo. It's bound by the Buffalo River on 3 sides, and it's bound by, depends on who you ask, but it's usually South Park Avenue is kind of the northern limit of it. Working class neighborhood, historically Irish. A lot of the workers from the original Erie Canal construction in the 1820s ended up settling here. They were Irish laborers. And then a lot of immigrants came to the area during the Irish famine years around 1850. And this mural, which we will drive past on the tour, I think is a beautiful recreation of the past and the present. The bridge that you see at the center of it is the Michigan Avenue Bridge. The iteration on the left, I believe, was the original bridge, the one that even predated the bridge that was wrecked by the freighter in 1959. I believe it was known locally as the Jackknife Bridge. That's what people called it. The Great Northern Grain Elevator was built in 1897. That's what we're looking at here. I would love to be able to tell you that this building is still with us. However, it is not. It was demolished in 2022 and 23. There was a partial collapse of one of the walls of it. It's actually a pretty historic building. It was one of the first large grain elevators built in Buffalo. It was the first to employ cylindrical steel bins for grain storage. And it was also one of the first to run on electricity, which, of course, around the turn of the 20th century was a big deal. The building, therefore, was part of the National Historic Registry. However, the collapse created a safety condition that couldn't really be rectified, and after a brief fight with preservationists, it was decided that the best thing to do was to raise the building to the ground. And so here's the before and after. You can see the original building where it stood, and now it's just a big hole in the ground today. We would have driven right past this if we had been on the original route that I had planned, which was to take you over both the Michigan Avenue and Ohio Street bridges, but we can't do that. So you still will be able to see this building from the new route that we're going to take. So in case you're wondering what that is, that's what it is. We also have examples of grain elevators that were abandoned and somewhat repurposed, like this one. The GLF elevator was built in 1909. Parts of it were raised, parts of it were repurposed as part of the Riverworks redevelopment, which was completed in 2014. Again,
Riverworks is awesome.
Oh, hi, Laura.
Hi. Surprise.
Nice to see you here.
Streak is still alive.
Yes, it is. You fraud. So Riverworks is another one of these things that was not around when I was in school. And it's nice to see that some of this industrial heritage is being sort of repurposed for, I think that it's not just like bars and tap rooms that they have here, but there's also a couple of concert venues that they have here at Riverworks. So it's an interesting place, and again, it's when the Michigan Avenue Bridge is operational, it's within walking distance of downtown and the arena where the Sabres play, so it's it's actually not it's not in a bad spot as long as you can get to it. And the people, as I said, the people at Riverworks are not happy with the current situation on the Michigan Avenue Bridge, as I mentioned. Having a drone really allows you to explore the post-industrial scenes in Buffalo like you never could have otherwise. And I'm not just saying that because it's the obvious and because it's true, but it gives you a whole new perspective on these places that you can't really get just by looking at them from ground level. So a lot of these drone pictures are from 2020 through 2020. Well, some of them are from a few weeks ago when I was in town. Actually, I was in town 2 weeks ago to complete scouting for this meet. The Cargill, Saskatchewan Pool Grain Elevator is what is pictured on your screen now. This was commissioned in 1925. It is the only grain elevator in Buffalo that is located directly adjacent to Lake Erie, which kind of put it in an advantageous position because being where it was, freighters didn't have to navigate the Buffalo River to get to the elevators that were more further upriver, which we'll talk about in a moment. It's been abandoned roughly since 1970. Today it's used part-time for storage of marine equipment. And from 1995 to 2007, there was a cruise ship docked next to it. And this was right at the beginning of my tenure in college, so a couple of these pictures are mine from 2007. The SS Marine Star was built in 1945 as a World War II era cargo ship. It was commissioned in July of 1945, just before the end of the war. It was then sent to the Great Lakes and was used as a passenger ship on the lakes, running between Detroit and Cleveland. It carried both passengers and automobiles. It was the largest passenger ship on the lakes. Service ended in 1962, and it never served a paying customer again. Kind of a similar history to, I know what we talked about last year with the SS United States, how its tenure ended in the 1960s, and then they just never knew what to do with it after that. Here we have another example of that, although on a much smaller scale, obviously. The ship was moored in Buffalo for about 12 years. Efforts at preservation eventually came to nothing, and the ship was sent to Turkey to be scrapped in 2008. There are a few angles of Buffalo that I think capture the modern city and the old industrial city quite like this shot. What you're looking at in the foreground is an area of town known as Silo City. It got the name from locals who were enamored with the numerous grain elevators that towered above the landscape, and you can see why they would have come up with a name like that. Only one of these buildings is still partially active, and that is, I'll show you the pictures of that in a moment. But there is a collection of grain elevators in this complex that were built between 1906 and 1925. Six of them to be exact. One of them was partially demolished about 25 years ago, I think. The one that is still active, you can see on the screen in your lower right, that is the standard elevator. That sits, I guess that's officially the north bank of the Buffalo River, even though the river is kind of running north to south at this point. Like I said, the river kind of meanders. It kind of has a lot of hairpin turns in it. It's got a lot of oxbows in it, so it's hard to really know what direction you're facing if you're on the river, just because the river changes direction so much. But Silo City is one of the largest examples that's still standing of the city's once proud industrial power. The city reached a peak around World War II. I know that the city handled during that time roughly 400,000 bushels of grain annually in the 1940s, and that has basically disappeared to nothing. Parts of this are just because of the natural evolution of technology and other cities becoming more competitive with Buffalo. But also one of the real daggers that caused the decline was the completion of the St. Lawrence Seaway in 1959. and simply just improved rail traffic between the Midwest and the East Coast. Alternate routes through alternate cities. The St. Lawrence Seaway allowed freighters to bypass Buffalo altogether as a cargo port. And so that was really what led to the steep decline in the grain industry in Buffalo. And I'm oversimplifying some of this to some degree. There are a lot of nuances to it. There's an entire show that I could do just devoted to the deindustrialization of Western New York. I'm not going to do that to you here, but the short version of it is basically what I just outlined for you. Now so when the Marine Star cruise ship left us, another ghost ship started to appear in Buffalo. Here is the SS Columbia, which was built in 1902 as an excursion steamship on the Great Lakes. Basically, it was based out of Detroit. She served pretty well in her career. She served almost 90 years. She was retired in 1991 and was still in pretty good condition when she was retired. The Columbia and her sister ship, the St. Clair, sailed down the Detroit River from downtown Detroit to, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of this, but Bois Blanc Island, which is an island in Ontario, on the Ontario side of the border, which had an amusement park on it. It was only reachable by boat. So you would have these excursion ships come and go from this amusement park on a daily basis. And the Columbia was one of those craft. Interesting history. I mean, since 1991, it's another one of these ships that nobody knows what to do with. And there's been talk about reviving the Columbia for lake excursions based out of Buffalo. Nothing has ever really come of that, and I don't know if it's not already too late to do anything to save the ship, but it is sitting here at a mooring in Silo City. And one of the stops on the tour is across the river from Silo City, actually, and you'll be able to see the ship from there. So that's something for you to look out for. I'm sure it's still going to be there, but, I don't think it's going anywhere between now and late July. If it's been there I think it's been moored there since 2015, so I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon.
Safe, yeah.
The Cargill Superior Grain Elevator, as we move upriver from Silo City, or Compass Southeast from there, was built in 1915. It was expanded twice, in 1919 and 1925, and has been out of service since the 1970s. It was the world's largest grain elevator building when it was completed in 1915, and we'll see in a moment that title didn't last very long in this facility's hands. Really impressive building. Again, the drone gives you so much more capability to explore this because it's kind of out in an isolated area. There's no legal way to actually approach the building unless you're on a boat, which I have not had the pleasure of doing. I know that there are some river tours that are offered during the summer, but I have not actually taken one of those to this point. If I had to pick a favorite picture that I've taken with the drone in Buffalo since 2020, be hard to do better than this one. This has long been a favorite of mine. You have the Cargill elevator on the right. Again, this kind of illustrates the path that the Buffalo River takes. So where the elevator on your right in the foreground is, the river is running basically compass east-west, and in the background it's running more or less north-south, maybe a little bit northwest to southeast even. And there's a lot of those curves in the river. So even though as the crow flies we're only maybe a mile or so from Lake Erie, we're several miles upriver at this point. kind of makes you wonder how lake freighters were ever even able to navigate this once upon a time. Because at one time, this was a really busy waterway with lake freighters and all that. I mentioned that the Cargill was the world's largest in 1915. It didn't make it very long in the number one spot, thanks to the building you see in the background. The concrete central elevator was built in 1917. It was the world's largest grain elevator building when completed. It's been out of service since 1975. The construction of this elevator was something of a top secret thing because it happened at the height of World War I. And because of the fear of German spies and German saboteurs, and because of the importance of this building, because of the amount of storage capacity that it had, the plans for this building were never actually made public. They were classified. And also some of the means and methods were as well. It was only until much later on, like within the last 50 years, that a lot of the stuff was formally declassified. But it is a very impressive structure. Even though it's been sitting around since 1975, in the last 50 years it's been sitting abandoned. It still is an incredibly sound building. And that's one of the reasons. So there's always a question that comes up every once in a while. Why is it that they don't just demolish these buildings? Well, they're built of reinforced concrete. And, reinforced concrete 100 years ago or even today is really expensive to try to demolish, when it comes to like explosives and all that. And so, the cheapest thing to do is to just leave them in place. And so that's what they've been doing. Some of these buildings stand a chance of being revived in other capacities than others. But by and large, there's never really been any plans proposed to try to bring any of them back to any sort of real usefulness. They do offer tours in Silo City every once in a while. I think there's like one of the 6 main elevators that's kept in fairly good condition for that purpose. But other than that, there's never really been a push to revitalize any of these buildings for any sort of entertainment entertainment value or anything like that. Outside of Chicago, Buffalo has the most houses designed by architect Frank Lloyd Wright. Did you know that?
Not aware of that, no.
I know that.
Okay. Well,
I knew that.
You did. Well, actually, one of Frank Lloyd Wright's greatest contributions to Buffalo is a building that was unceremoniously demolished 75 years ago. The old Larkin Administration Building, which there is still a recreated piece of the cornerstone that you can go and visit in the Larkinville section of the city. But this building was built in 1906. It was the headquarters of the Larkin Soap Company, which went bust during World War II. Nobody knew what to do with the building, and this was, of course, before historic preservation really became a thing, and so the building was demolished. I think people still consider, of all the demolition that happened post-World War II as the city moved away from its industrial base, I think most people would say that the loss of the Larkin building was the biggest one of them all.
Mm.
I know we've talked about roads a lot, but I want to talk about railroads one more time, because we have a big one here. The Central Terminal, commissioned in 1929, it was the city's main passenger rail hub, and it served that purpose for 50 years. It really reached its heyday during World War II, but then passenger numbers really started to fall off after that. And the depopulation of the city. I'll get to it. I'll try saying that with a mouthful of teeth. A variety of factors led to the decline of the station as being a viable option for the city. It shuttered its doors in 1979, and is another one of these landmarks that no one has really known what to do with since then. It is a very visible landmark in East Buffalo. The office tower that is central to the building is 17 stories. It's built in this beautiful Art Deco style that was contemporary to the construction of the City Hall building that we talked about at the opening of the show. But large parts of the complex remain in place today as they were in the late 1970s, but have been more or less abandoned. There have been talks about reviving parts of the complex, like either mixed-use housing or mixed-use entertainment. The issue is that, number one, nobody really can agree on what they want to do with the complex, and the other issue is funding. With hundreds of millions of dollars necessary to bring even the main building and its adjacent areas into some sort of modern capacity to be used. And I'm also talking about, like, from a safety/ADA perspective. It's hard to imagine how we're going to come up with the money to do something really appropriate that brings this property back to the glory that it once had.
Yeah. So, what's really interesting is a good close friend of mine, and I also consider him to be a professional mentor. His name's Daniel Campo, and I think I've referenced him on the show before. Anyway, he's done a lot of research in Buffalo on the grain elevators as well as the central terminal, and looked into, like, the sort of citizen-driven campaigns to kind of reclaim these places. He has a book that's actually forthcoming later this year. But yeah, it makes for an interesting case studies because of the lack of public sector funding, but then also because it's a declining city, so you don't have the same sort of adaptive reuse market that you do in other cities. So it does so you have these sort of collectives of different groups, whether it's residents, business owners, entrepreneurs, planners, or even the sort of like guerrilla, like, oh, we're gonna kind of come in and do informal stuff. It's kind of an interesting contrast to how a lot of historic preservation normally happens. And so yeah, anyone that's interested in more about these awesome buildings, which I had the privilege of checking a lot of these places out when I was in Buffalo back in 2018. But yeah, I definitely recommend looking into his research and I don't know the title of his upcoming book, but I know Buffalo is featured pretty prominently in there. In addition to some other Great Lakes cities like Pittsburgh and Detroit.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll let me know when it comes out because I'm interested in reading that.
Oh yeah, I definitely will let you know.
All right, we got a couple more properties to get to, real quick.
As I was saying, is there a tree growing out of that building?
Well, I guess that's what happens when it's left for dead for however long it's been, 40 years.
Oh.
Buildings don't grow on trees, but trees do grow on buildings.
Well, if you leave nature to its own devices long enough.
Yep, all right. Lighthouse.
Yeah, Doug is not here, but, I know he likes lighthouses, so I'll give him a shout out, and I'll make you aware of this lighthouse. The Buffalo Harbor South Entrance Light was commissioned in 1903. It's been out of service since 1993. It was replaced by an automated buoy just a little bit north of here on the harbor. It was put in because around this time there was a lot of lake freighter traffic in the southern part of the harbor, serving all the steel mills in this part of the city. So they put in this permanent lighthouse to sort of mark the entryway into the ship canals that all the ships disembarked and embarked their cargoes on. It is part of the National Historic Registry. It's been there since 2007. I don't know that you're really going to be able to see this from the drive, but know that it is there, and it's, for lighthouse fanatics, it's something to keep an eye out for as you drive into town on the Skyway. All of the landmarks that I've mentioned really are secondary, at least in my personal opinion, to the site that we're going to deal with now. The 1,600-acre site along Lake Erie in the cities of Buffalo and Lackawanna was once owned by the Lackawanna Steel Company, which was an independent company formed in 1840 and was merged into Bethlehem Steel in 1922. It served as a subsidiary to Bethlehem Steel until 1983, when this entire complex was shut down. There were thousands of jobs that were lost because of that. And it was incremental. Like, it started in the late 60s and it gradually, snowballed into a full shutdown by 1983. This site was at one time the world's largest steel production site in, anywhere, not just in the United States, but in the world. So it was a very prosperous corner of Western New York, if you will, that's now largely derelict and out of use. As I said, when I picked up my camera in 2007 for the first time, I wasn't photographing wildflowers and rainbows. And more than any other place, I tended to gravitate to this area. Because people into psychiatry and stuff like that, might want to have a field day with this idea, but you tend to photograph and document the things that kind of reflect how you feel. And so I was kind of, getting into urban photography, urban exploration, but places that were kind of left for dead, that kind of stuff. And so my initial dives into photography kind of, demonstrated that, I think. Not to get into all the details, but that kind of is how it is. There are a lot of different things a lot of different directions I could go in with this. These are some of my favorite pictures from over the years. This site will be visible to you as you drive through Lackawanna and then on Route 5 as you head into town. We're not, if we had been doing like a mini meet of like 5 people, I could have possibly gotten away with doing a drive on the roads through the actual steel mill, but I don't think I can get away with that with a group as large as I think we're going to have. But yeah, just the scale of this property is still very impressive. It is a symbol of an era that faded from this part of the country long ago and has not really ever been replaced with anything. I think in large part because people just simply don't know what to do with it. It was rumored for a period of time, as we take sort of a wider view in these pictures. There was a rumor going around at one time that the Bills were looking to build their new stadium somewhere in here as part of like a redeveloped entertainment complex for this area, which actually is a pretty good idea.
Sure.
But, this is Buffalo, and unfortunately they have a history of making really silly decisions. They tend to not do the right thing with their planning and their placement of their projects and stuff like that. I mean, this is stuff that goes back decades that I don't want to bore you with, but again, I feel like not placing the new Bill Stadium, either downtown or like right here, I think is a huge missed opportunity.
It's a waste of land. That's what it is right now.
It's prime real estate that is contaminated. Well, it would take a lot just to make it feasible as an entertainment district, but even that, I mean, that is not beyond the scope of technology today.
No, it's got to be cleaned up, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Industrial waste areas are often looked at and said frowned upon.
Yeah, so for your information, what we were looking at on the last slide, so this picture shows you're looking north towards town and Route 5 is on the right as you're looking north. So if you pan the camera just to the right or to the east, you have this angle. So this is more like what you're looking at here, like all these warehouses and galvanizing units. Like this used to be what the other side of the highway looked like before that was all, demolished to the ground years ago. But there was still some of that stuff hanging on. And a lot of this is still here. I took these pictures in 2020, but even on my most recent visit in 2023. Just again, to remind you that Buffalo was at one time the steelmaking capital of the world. I know that that's hard to believe nowadays, but yeah, it's an impressive sight. Even today, even though like 90% of the buildings or so have been demolished, there's still enough of it standing that you can kind of really get a good feel for what was there, and it's really impressive. And as I said, the pictures go back 15 years or more. That's kind of what I first got into, and it kind of stayed with me, and so it's interesting to kind of, it's funny, like the three pictures on the right and on the bottom are like older pictures from more than 10 years ago, and then this picture from the upper left was from 2 weeks ago. So it's kind of an interesting exercise, and the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? And again, here's some older pictures too. You won't get these kinds of views on the driving tour, but as you pass by this site, know that there are a lot of people who have been inside here and who have documented this stuff, and there are people out there who have done it much better than I have. But there's a lot of additional information out there about this site if you're interested in learning more. I'll just kind of leave it at that. But it's a really remarkable site in a lot of ways. It's like it's kind of frozen in time, that kind of thing. Here's another one. I mean, there's just so many different. I can get carried away just going through pictures of this all night. There's just so many really interesting angles that you can get, and it's very odd to have a picture like this where you have the industrial past in the foreground and you have the city skyline in the background. It's a very odd landscape. Now, I want to leave you with a little bit of good news, because we don't want to end on that note. So the operations at Bethlehem Steel ceased in 1983, and ever since then nobody's really known what to do with the whole site. However, I don't know, what do I have here? I've got 30 acres of this site has been redeveloped to date for renewable energy development. You may have noticed in one of those wide shots that I had, there are lots of solar panels that have gone in recently. One of the big projects that's happened, it started when I was in school and kind of was finished when I left school, so it's kind of interesting to see the parallel there, is the Steel Winds development. This is a series of 14 wind turbines that were constructed in two phases. The first phase was in 2007, the second phase was in 2012. Each wind turbine is 2.5 megawatt hours apiece. However, in typical Buffalo fashion, what you see today is merely a fraction of what they were planning to do. It's kind of a half solution. You see this a lot with Buffalo planning. Like, they start something and it looks really promising and then they just never finish it. Like, I didn't get into this earlier, but even the canal side development, it's a nice idea, but it's only a fraction of what they were ever thinking to do with it. The central terminal, they never figured out what to do with it. They still don't know what the hell they're doing with Main Street, trying to get businesses back there. They put the university campus out in Amherst, which was the dumbest thing they could have done, because this was around the time when people were starting to leave downtown anyway. But they were afraid of student riots. This was like the late 60s. They were afraid of the race riots. They were afraid of putting a lot of young people downtown, for a downtown campus. And so they stuck them out in the suburbs where they couldn't disrupt the downtown business. That's the real story. That's not the story that people will tell you, but that's the real story. the official account is that they put it out there because of suburbanization, and that's where the people were moving to. So that's why they wanted to put the campus out there. No, that's not the real reason. No, the real reason had to do with the things that I alluded to: the riots, the fear of the riots, and the fear of a student young population in the middle of a big city. But the decisions that the city has made over the last 50 years certainly haven't helped bring it back from deindustrialization. The mistakes that they've made in the past, the mistakes that, in my opinion, they continue to make, the plans that they have that just continue to go unrealized to their full potential. I mean, imagine having like a wind farm here and then having the Bills Stadium like right behind it. Now, that would be pretty cool, I think. And it's in a good spot that's only a few miles from downtown. That's pretty easy to get to. And you could have like a whole entertainment district there, you know? That's a pretty good use of 1,600 acres, or even a fraction of that. So that's the wind farm history. They're trying to do something with that property, but like I said, they never really have figured it out. Just like they've never really figured out a lot of things. One thing that I did figure out was that college was tough. And I know that if I go back a couple of slides, I'll go back to this slide for a minute. This site represents a lot of things. It represents the past. It represents, you know, a dark history that's never really been, we've never really come back from the mistakes that we've made. It also kind of represents hope and the chance at a new start. And I graduated, and I'm very proud that I graduated. Although when I did, I said that I didn't think of it as graduating. I thought of it as just surviving. You know, because I was not a good student. I'll be honest with you. That was a part of the problem too. But there were also personal issues that I had that, again, I won't get into, but it really kind of darkened my tenure. And I don't bring this up to ask for your pity or anything like that. You know, we all have adversity in our lives. I'm just proud that I had the strength and the fortitude to push my way through and overcome it and get to a point where I could graduate. I took this picture on my graduation weekend. It was 11 years ago last month. And it's one of my favorite pictures that I've ever taken. And you know, I know that I've made mistakes, but I also know that I didn't deserve some of the things that happened to me. There was a stint in jail in there that I had no business going to jail for what I was accused of. And I know for a fact that the people who were involved, who were pressing charges against me, would agree with that today. I had no business going to jail with people who were on drugs or who were wanted in murder cases. I was lumped in with those people, you know. This happened, by the way, in, like, during finals week, one semester. So you can kind of imagine how that was really fucking with me, too. Now you kind of know why I had to kind of claw my way back. And that might not have been coincidental that they went after me at that time, too. But I can't prove that. You know, that's just one of those things that sticks with me, I guess. We just have really, sometimes you're dealt a raw deal. And sometimes things happen to you that don't deserve to happen to you. But there was only really one thing that I could do, and that was just to keep on fighting. You know, Muhammad Ali, whenever you saw him hit the mat, what was the first thing he did? He got up and he kept on fighting. He may not win the fight, but he was going to go down with everything that he had. And
they go down swinging.
Go down swinging, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I was wrongfully accused of something that, thank God, it happened in the days before Me Too, because if that had happened in the last few years, I know my life definitely would have been ruined. I'll just say that much. But I had the strength and I had the supporting cast around me to fight back, get my academics in order so that I could graduate, and I made it out of there. And I won't tell you that I didn't make mistakes along the way, but you know what? People make their mistakes as they struggle uphill. And if you can make it to the mountaintop, you've done a pretty damn good job. And as an epilogue to the epilogue, I will say that when I graduated, about more or less exactly 1 year later, I found myself starting with Tappan Zee Constructors. You know, so in that sense, the story does have a happy ending. And I don't know, maybe as we wrap this up, maybe that's the real reason I wanted to do a meet here in Buffalo, is because I've felt since I graduated that there was unfinished business here, and maybe I'm still subconsciously in search of that happy ending. And I did listen. I don't ask any of you to attend this meet because you want me to feel good about myself. That's not what I'm trying to get at. This is more of a personal thing. You know, so it's not. I didn't do this specifically for that reason. But as I thought about it more and more, I realized that maybe that was what was really going on subconsciously. And yeah, I'd like to finally write the last chapter. It's gonna be good. If I get you if I get you dopes involved, it's gonna be good.
Yeah, I wish I could just give you like the biggest hug right now, Dan.
I would just say thank you. And I would just say to anybody who watches this, who goes through adversity in your life, because you're gonna go through it. You know, nobody gets through life unscathed.
Ever.
Just keep fighting. You know, sometimes we don't know how we're going to do it. You know, the logistics are a little bit complicated. They're different for everybody, but you know, if you can't win, try to win. Because good can come out of that too. Like I said, I don't consider my tenure at the University of Buffalo to be all that successful. I continue to tell people that yes, I graduated, but I survived. And I survived to fight another day, and I got a lucky break or two, no doubt, but I ended up on a pretty sweet gig within a year of leaving. A life-changing gig. So that's my message to you guys tonight. Is you all come from different walks of life, you all come from different backgrounds, but that's the one thing that we all have in common, is that we all have faced something in our lives, or we all will face something at some point. And I'm on your side. I'm on your side to support you. I'm on your side to, I'm on your side because I've been there. And I just want you guys to know that when you talk to me, you're not just talking to a dope who likes roads. You're talking to somebody who's been a fighter. And kind of a lot of his personality kind of came out of those years when I was struggling and when I was fighting just to stay in school and fighting all the psychological stuff that came around with whatever happened. So that's kind of where the true whiz comes from. And I hope I get to happily share some of this with you guys on July 29th. So please join us. I know we've got a pretty extensive guest list already, but, we would love it if even more of you came out, because this is going to be a good one. And join us for the after party, too, at the ball game.
Yeah.
I'm out of things to say, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you all very much for watching. You've been a member. You've been watching. What the hell am I talking about? You've been watching a Roadway Wiz live webinar. Certainly hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and check out all the past episodes that we've done. There's like over 100 live episodes that we've done to this point, and there's a heck of a lot more that I've got lined up in the future. And there's a lot of stuff that I'd like to do for New Orleans in February, so keep an eye out for that stuff. I might start digging into that, like, as soon as the meet in Buffalo is done, because I'm going to have to pivot pretty quickly on that. But until we speak again next time, I'm going to sign off. My voice is fried at this point. Thank you all. Thank you to Bill. Thank you to Scott. Thank you to Laura. Nice of you to pop in at the right time.
You want to say hi, Rainey? Rainey's here too.
And Rainey's here too. All right.
And don't forget Erica and David.
I was about to say them, but I got distracted by Rainey. So yes, thank you. David was here, and Erica was here, and
Hey, you're a party!
it was kind of a party, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna thank you all for watching. Hope to see you on July 29th. I love you guys from the bottom of my heart. Love you guys.
We love you too, Dan.
See you next time.
Hey, what button?